Rock Planning Commission's meeting. Yes, it's warm in here. It's warm up here too. So we feel your pain. With that, would you call the roll, please?
Chairman LaTour.
Here.
Vice Chair Stebbins.
Here.
Commissioner Berry.
Here.
Commissioner Brock.
Here.
Commissioner Bynum.
Here.
Commissioner Hamilton. Commissioner Haynes.
Here.
Commissioner May.
Here.
Commissioner Rahman.
Here.
Commissioner Thomas.
Here.
Commissioner Vogel. 10 present. You do have a quorum.
Okay, thank you, Commissioners. You were given a copy of the minutes. What would be your pleasure on approving them?
Mr. Chairman, I've moved for the approval of the minutes of the March 14th meeting with all staff comments and recommendations.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor, hold your right hand up, please. Those opposed? Thank you. Okay. Mr. Carney, if you take us through the consent agenda, please.
I'll do it. And to confirm for those that are present, on the regular agenda, item A, University and R. Item B, the amendment to Chapter 36. Item 3, Fitzroy Promenade. Item 4, 22 Davenport. Item 5, Orion Federal Credit Union. Item 12, 2322 West 3rd. And item 13, 517 Maple Street.
And 17. You have 17? 17?
17?
Mm-hmm.
And 17.
We have a card on number 17, which is Shackelford Forest Communities. All right. With those cards, the consent agenda consists of the following items. We have 5 items on consent for deferral. Item 1, file S1312B. Lot 1R and 2R Barrow Plaza Addition Preliminary Plat, located at 9101 West Markham. On April 16th, 2019, the applicant requested deferral of the item to July 18th, 2019, which is after the new FEMA flood maps come out in June. Staff recommends approval of the deferral request. Item 2, file S1665H. Wildwood Ridge, Phase 4 preliminary plat located at the west end of Summershade Drive. On April 9th, 2019, the applicant requested deferral of this item to allow for time to pursue various options to address fire department issues. Staff recommends deferral of the item to the June 6th, 2019 meeting. Item 10, file Z9401, 7900 Doyle Springs Road, short form PID. Located at 7900 Doyle Springs Road. On April 18th, 2019, the applicant requested deferral of this item to the June 6th, 2019 agenda to allow for consideration of a possible change to the proposed use. Staff recommends approval of the deferral request. Item 15, file Z9406, Flagship Homes, Townhouse Apartments, short form PDR, located at the northwest corner of Florida Avenue and Indiana Avenue. On April 10th, 2019, the applicant requested deferral of the item to allow for time to review the cost implications of the public works requirements. Staff recommends deferral of the item to the June 6th, 2019 agenda. And staff would like to add item 8 to consent deferral, file Z7605D, that's lots 2 and 3, Chavot Office Park, short form PCD, located at 17705 Cantrell Road. On April 25th, the applicant requested deferral of this item to allow for time to meet with the neighboring neighborhood. Staff recommends approval of the request to defer the item to June 6th. It will require a bylaw waiver due to the late request for deferral of the item. On consent approval, the following items. Item 6, file Z5570-D, TRL Properties, revised short form PDO, located at 12418 and 12420 Cantrell Road. Staff recommends approval of the requested revised PDO subject to compliance with the comments and conditions outlined in paragraphs D, E, and F, and the staff analysis in the agenda staff report. Item 7, File Z6810-A, Dogwood Partners, short form PDO, located at 3023 West 7th Street. Staff recommends approval of the requested PDO, subject to compliance with the comments and conditions outlined in paragraphs D, E, and F, and the staff analysis in the agenda staff report. Staff recommends that 3 additional on-site parking spaces be provided in conjunction with the future addition. Item number 9, File Z7854-F, Grow Learning Center, revised PID, located at 5 Remington Cove. Staff recommends approval of the requested revised PID, subject to compliance with the comments and conditions outlined in paragraphs D, E, and F, and the staff analysis in the agenda staff report. Staff recommends approval of the street buffer variance. And as a note, traffic engineering has approved the on-site traffic and stacking plan based on the proposed enrollment. Item number 11, File Z9402, Greenhaw Properties, short form PDR, located at 3523 West Capitol Avenue. Staff recommends approval of the requested PDR, subject to compliance with the comments and conditions outlined in paragraphs D, E, and F, and the staff analysis in the agenda staff report. Item number 14, File Z9405, Innovation Valley, short form PDR, located southwest of 13815 and 13823 Fern Valley Lane. Staff recommends approval of the requested PDR, subject to compliance with the comments and conditions outlined in paragraphs D, E, and F, and the staff analysis in the agenda staff report. Staff recommends that use of the building be limited to the personal use of this applicant or to the occupant of any single-family residence which may be built on this lot in the future. Item number 16, Village at the Gateway, long-form PRD, File Z9407, located west of the existing village at the Gateway, 4 blocks west of Vimy Ridge Road. Staff recommends approval of the requested PRD, subject to compliance with the comments and conditions outlined in paragraphs D, E, and F, and the staff analysis in the agenda staff report. This includes a recommendation that the public streets be abandoned as public right-of-way prior to final plating of, prior to development of the proposed PRD. Item number 18, File Z9409, Fletcher Ridge, long form PRD, located on the north side of Canis Road, west of Chenal Downs Drive. Staff has completed their review. There are no outstanding issues. All sidewalks will be 5 feet in width where required. There are no master street plan variances required for right-of-way width or street design. The Canis Road roundabout will be constructed in consideration for future pedestrian access with curb and gutter, with street lights installed in all 4 corners and constructed in conformance with AASHTO and MUTCD standards. An access easement must be provided for the secondary and emergency access from this subdivision through the Potlatch Deltic property through Tract O of the Wildwood Place Phase 7 to the Wild Creek Circle right-of-way. The subdivision sign is to be placed no closer than 30 feet from the south end of the roundabout median, and the drainage analysis has been reviewed and found to be sufficient. Staff recommends approval of the PRD subject to compliance with all comments and conditions outlined in paragraphs D, E, and F, and the staff analysis as updated. And Mr. Chairman, did we want to read into the record the statement from the citizens of West Pulaski County Neighborhood Association?
Yes, please.
We did receive a statement from citizens of West Pulaski County Neighborhood Association, position statement on Fletcher Ridge PRD, and they asked that this be made a part of the record, and the applicant has agreed to that as well. The citizens of West Pulaski County's expanded steering committee understand the city of Little Rock will grow into the western part of Pulaski County, wish to see that growth be done in ways that will preserve the character of the area. The CWPC committee and other community leaders have met several times with representatives of Potlatch-Deltic and its subsidiaries regarding a proposed development on Canis Road across from Chenal Downs. While this should not be taken as an objection to the plan, there were three concerns expressed as follows: the density of the proposal, which is 3.92 lots per acre, as it bears on the expected increase in traffic on Canis Road. The proposal appears inconsistent with the character of the area. Concern about the effect the plan will have on Fletcher's Hollow, 2 miles on Canis Road from Chenal Downs entry to Walnut Grove Road. The CWPC hopes to constructively work with Potlatch-Deltic in the future to preserve the character of the area, including Fletcher's Hollow, submitted by citizens of West Pulaski County Neighborhood Association, Michael W. Mitchell. And last item on consent agenda is item 19, file LA 0083, Village at the Gateway land alteration variance located south of the Village at the Gateway, west of Vimy Ridge Road. Staff recommends approval of the advanced grading variance, subject to compliance with the comments and conditions outlined in paragraph D of the agenda staff report. In addition to paragraph D, the variance request is subject to compliance with the following conditions: a grading permit in accordance with section 29-186C and D will be required prior to any land clearing or grading activity on the site, and an 80-foot temporary undisturbed buffer will be maintained adjacent to Vimy Ridge Road, and 50-foot temporary undisturbed buffers maintained adjacent to Pleasant Hill Road and other properties. And that completes the consent agenda.
Thank you, Mr. Carney. First, a motion waiving the bylaw for item Z7605D, the Chavot project, would be in order.
Mr. Chairman, I move for a bylaw waiver on item 8, the 6-week deferral for item Z7605D for the less than 5 days notification for deferral.
There's a motion, a second on the waiver. Any discussion? Hearing none. Those in favor say aye. Raise your hand. I gotta get that right. Those opposed, no. The second item before we vote, I have a card that came in late after he was already presenting the consent agenda. It's on item 5 from Steve Mangan.
If it's on consent, I'm fine.
You're happy? I am too. Okay, having with that said, you've heard the consent agenda. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Mr. Chairman, I move we approve the consent agenda, including all staff comments and conditions.
Is there a second? Second. Any discussion on the consent agenda? All those in favor, please raise your right hand. Consent agenda is approved. If your item was on a consent agenda, you're welcome to stay to watch your government in action, but you're equally welcome to leave because your item's approved. And now we'll move forward, if you would, Mr. Carney, to item A.
Mr. Chairman, members of the Commission, the first item is item A, file Z5534-C, University and R Street, short form PCD, located on the northwest corner of North University Avenue and R Street. This item has in one form or another been on this Commission's agenda for roughly 6 months. The request is to rezone property from R2, single-family residential, to PCD to allow for a mixed-use development consisting of a 2-story building, the ground floor being a list of C1 neighborhood commercial uses, and the second floor being four residential spaces. The ground floor will consist of a total of 5,608 square feet of retail space using the selected list of C1 uses. The second floor is proposed to consist of four 1,402 square foot dwellings. Access to the commercial spaces is from both the east and west sides of the building. Access to the residential spaces is from a central lobby area which contains stairs and a lobby. The building height has been reduced. At one time it was a 3-story proposal. It's now down to 2. Building height reduced to 26 feet 8 inches with 3 tower parapet elements extending up to 31 feet 4 inches on the east and west facades. Signage is still proposed for both the east and west facades. The applicant has stated an alternative use may be to utilize the first floor for 4 residential units matching the proposed use for the second floor. Throughout this process, the applicant has been meeting regularly and working with the Heights Residents Association, and through those discussions they've made various changes to the plan, including proposing changes to R Street, including constructing some bulb outs to narrow the roadway west of the site, as well as signage to discourage traffic from traveling west, bound on R Street to the residential neighborhood on Normandy. The Heights Neighborhood Association and the applicant met as recently as I believe it was Monday night, and the Heights Residents Association submitted a letter of support for the application, which you were provided. Let me read this into the record if I may. This is again from the Heights Neighborhood Association. The board unanimously agreed to support the proposed project at University NR with the following suggested requirements added to the proposal, and they're as follows. The residential rental units, if utilized, shall have lease terms of no less than 1 year, no subletting to be permitted, no Airbnb or similar short-term rental operation to be permitted. The weekday and Saturday commercial spaces operational hours to be 8 a.m. to 7 p.m. and Sunday commercial operation hours to be noon to 6 p.m. Then there's to be an enforceable agreement with Regions Bank, who is the owner of the property, that it redirect its exterior lighting inward and downward. This is referring to the bank property to the south, so that light from those fixtures does not enter the property of adjoining residential units. The applicant has amended his application to include those suggested conditions as part of his application. Staff is continuing to recommend denial of the application. The concept of extending commercial activity and commercial zoning across university flies in the face of everything we as staff have done in dealing with properties along through here. We have been consistent in saying that University Avenue should be a line separating commercial from the residential. Our concern is with the extension of commercial west of University Avenue, there's a negative impact as it begins to intrude into the residential neighborhood, which is located to the west. We have stated we would support an increased density beyond the traditional single-family residential for this site. We would support even 2 floors of the 4 units that he's proposing on the second floor. That increased density in our mind, still remaining residential, seems appropriate for this site. But again, as long as there's commercial zoning proposed as part of this application, extending west of University Avenue, staff will recommend denial of the application.
Thank you, Mr. Carney, for the benefit of the audience. First off, I noticed that more people came in late. If you want to speak, you need to fill out a green card. They're out in the hall. The applicant, each side will have 20 minutes maximum. to state their case. The applicant will go first. The applicant can use all his time, or he can present, or he can defer and wait till the opposition. So if the applicant would come forward.
Hello.
Welcome.
Good evening. Thank you. Yes, my name is Brad Peterson. I'm a civil engineer with Craft and Toll Engineers here in Little Rock, and thank you for your time this evening. And I'll try to keep it brief, my comments, and leave enough time for discussion from the commissioners and the public. When we started this project, we really saw it as an opportunity for a unique development in the Heights. It's truly mixed use, residential component with commercial uses in the same building is not something that you see in the Heights. We hear staff's comments and we understand them, and that's why we didn't go with a full commercial development, but something that softened that traditional edge across University. As far as our site plan and our proposal itself, we have worked diligently with the neighborhood, the neighbors and the Heights Neighborhood Association to make what modifications we could to the plan as far as building height, hours of operation. We've increased or maintained the number of parking spaces that we had when it was 3 stories to allow for adequate parking, providing covered parking, of course, screening and shielding of parking in the site from those adjacent uses. As far as the traffic, we understand those concerns and again have proposed improvements on our street to handle both traffic that would travel west on our street and also drainage to keep some of the road runoff that's leaving the right of way and going across properties. And we understand the concerns and we can answer those questions. We feel like we've worked diligently to address all the concerns as far as lighting, traffic, parking, uses within the building and restricting them down to things that will be low intensity, nothing that creates noise, trash, traffic, that's more walk-up retail. That we see this as the tenants, retail tenants in this building would be attractive to shoppers and customers that are already in the Heights neighborhood or live in the neighborhood where you would walk there, or you'd already be dining or shopping in the Heights, and you would make this part of your shopping trip, but not necessarily destination retail where you would travel to this place, this building. And so I'm going to yield my time and answer questions from the commission or from residents.
Thank you. We have another card that's in favor of it. Norman Hodges.
Mr. Chairman and Commissioners, we've really appreciated working with the architect and the developer on this. This started out as a project that we could never have supported, and while I think we'd all prefer total residential there, this, over the time frame that several months that we've been involved with it, has evolved to something that the Neighborhood Association certainly thinks will be a benefit to the neighborhood. We understand they may still be some traffic issues, but it is Cantrell and University after all. In any case, and we've gone through the discussion with the neighbors as well, and several of them are here, and they have a past grace over this, so to speak. So we are supportive of the project as proposed and with the amendments that were mentioned earlier. Thank you.
Well, I guess I have one question. Is it in the write-up? He said it's either going to be the ground floor will either be residential or commercial.
Correct.
Either.
Our desire is for commercial, so we'd like the approval to include commercial on the first floor, but we'd like to have the option for going to 4 residential units on that first floor without coming back and amending it to first.
That's fine. You want commercial.
We do want commercial. That's
There
what we'd
you go.
like.
Okay. Any other questions on this end? Okay, we have a couple of opposition cards. Thank you very much. We'll get back if you need to. Kathleen Olson.
Good afternoon. I'm Kathleen Olson, and I'm here as a resident of this area and drive up and down University and that area every day. 7 days a week, commercial, going across on the west side of University is much too of an intense use for that area. Also, there are new homes that have just recently been built that right behind where this piece of property is. It goes to show you the desire for residential in that area. So to claim that you need to have commercial there is not really a viable argument because the residential area is still viable. Traffic. If you have to turn west or if you have to turn left into that piece of property, living there or using it for commercial, you could back up traffic out to Cantrell Road, because if you can't get across, you can't get there and turn left, then all that traffic that's trying to come across University at Cantrell is going to be backed up. It is not realistic to think that at certain times people are going to be able to go in and out of that property and use it for commercial. Not going to happen. Half the time during busy hours, traffic is backed up on University all the way past R Street, almost to Kavanaugh. So they've also asked for some variances, I believe, on buffers and some of the parking. I would ask you and urge you to say no to this. The neighborhood association probably has worked with them. It's certainly an improvement, but that doesn't mean the neighborhood has to accept commercial. Thank you.
Thank you. Ruth Bell?
I need to confirm exactly what this application I'm talking about is. Is it still commercial on the first floor, residential on the second floor?
I believe that's what he just said, yes.
Okay, but he was also kind of suggesting that if he couldn't get that, he'd go for something else. I wanted to be sure I knew what we were talking about.
The PCD application is for a two-story building. The upper floor will contain 4 dwelling units. The ground floor under this application, he's asking for either to be able to have that list of commercial uses or for residential units.
Does that mean that it's definitely going to be commercial if it passes, or will it definitely be residential, or will it definitely be a %?
Well, this application is very similar to any other planned development application we see where an applicant is proposing a list of uses that they might be allowed to put on a property. In this case, he's proposing to use a portion of that building for a list of uses, which includes either the C1 or residential.
That's kind of like having your cake and eating it too. Okay, as you all up there know, I am Ruth Bell. I am with the League of Women Voters. And I thought this was important enough to write a statement. We oppose the proposal for many reasons, beginning with traffic. Existing traffic on that section of University between Cantrell and Kavanaugh is already dense and hazardous. Cars on R or University already have difficulty turning in or out of those streets, and it is life-threatening, because I tried it once, to attempt to cross University on R Street. Putting 7-day-a-week, I guess it's now 10 hours a day, businesses at that location will only increase the traffic problems. Traffic is like water. It follows the path of least resistance. Many cars leaving the applicant's site rather than attempting to turn on University will, whether or not our street is one way, will turn west on our street, go to Normandy, turn north on Normandy to get to Kavanaugh, which will heavily increase traffic in that very secluded part of Normandy. Requested business hours are still pretty intrusive. It means that customers and employees who have to get there before the customers will be talking, slamming car doors, receiving freight or sending shipments from early morning close to through early evening close to the adjacent residences. And I will have to say that my experience here at the Planning Commission has shown me that approval of one inappropriate use is followed by other applications for additional inappropriate uses. And those additional applications are justified because you already approved one like it. For all those reasons, we would like you to follow the staff's recommendation and vote this application down. The better use for this property is for residential at some level of density. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bell. Would the applicant like to address those?
Okay. Yes, thank you. We appreciate those comments. It's a very productive conversation, and we feel it's going to lead to the best project possible. If I can address the hours and days of operation, we were intentional when we selected the use for this site to have nothing that would be intrusive, nothing that would create a lot of traffic, high staff demands. There's no restaurants, there's no liquor stores, there's no tobacco stores, there's no dry cleaner drop-off or anything that would have traffic at early hours or late in the evenings. We selected that 8 a.m. to 7 p.m. since that's consistent with other commercial uses in the Heights, and we've consented to the noon till 6 on Sunday, which is also consistent. And Mr. Hodges did point out to me that it's a far stretch to even compare Sunday hours in the Heights since it is so limited. We don't have defined tenants in this building yet. There isn't a specific use. As Mr. Carney indicated, we're looking for a percentage that we're allowed to use for commercial. Nothing's defined. So to argue about when staff will be there and how much noise will be there, it's really moot at this point. We want a quality development. We understand our neighbors and the neighborhood, and we want something in there that's going to be popular and productive for everyone. As far as traffic, our street is going to remain a two-way, and the residential uses are still allowed to use our street to its full extent. The limit will be to the commercial traffic and traffic leaving University. The bump outs that were mentioned will reduce the width of our street to 20 feet, and it'll be signed for local traffic only. There'll be signage at the bank exit and this property's exit that directs that commercial traffic back to University. And we all understand that University and Cantrell does create a problem with traffic. It does get congested. It's a very limited time in the mornings and the afternoons. We see this as a walk-up retail possibility. It's not a destination retail. It's not a heavy in the morning or heavy in the evening traffic. So we don't consider that to be a leading cause of traffic. Development of this property to be a leading cause of traffic at that intersection. Regarding the buffer variance on the front, we're not proposing that any part of the building extend over the sidewalk. We're providing a very wide sidewalk at this location. There'll be street trees and a brick edge, if you will, at the curb that will enhance the neighborhood, enhance the look of University Avenue. We'll widen out the curb and straighten it with the curb that's to the north, provide drainage improvements on the street. It'll be consistent with the neighborhood. That buffer isn't putting the building right up on the curb or right up on the back of the sidewalk. It's consistent with other walk-up commercial that's already in the Heights. I've mentioned the University and R Street traffic, that's really caused by Cantrell, and we honestly have done everything that we can to control this site as far as traffic, lighting, noise, hours of operation. The buffer up to the west for residential, we have the dense evergreen plantings. They'll be 15 feet when they're planted, possibly up to 30 feet at full maturity. We'll have an opaque cedar fence along that property line, and the parking that faces west will be covered parking. That's in our application to have covered parking, and that'll be dedicated for residents and staff of the commercial uses. So if people are coming to work or coming home late, leaving for work early, getting there before hours for their shop, they'll be in that covered area, so their lights aren't going to be shining out into the neighborhood. They'll be fully protected and enclosed in that covered parking. And as far as additional uses, this is the last piece that's undeveloped currently on the west side of University. It's nowhere nearly maybe as objectable as a bank branch. It doesn't create the traffic that a branch bank would. That's what we have on both sides of this. And this doesn't lead to future commercial development. It's really the last piece. What we're proposing as far as a transitional use is consistent with modern day planning practices. If you have a heavy travel corridor, you would put transitional and mixed use property on that corridor rather than going from a hard commercial use to a hard residential use. And for those reasons, we feel we have a solid application. We ask your approval. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioners. Questions, discussions?
I have a couple questions for the staff to understand the recommendation. You're recommending to vote against it, and I guess, was traffic one of the primary motivations, or the creation of traffic? Was that a motivation for recommending to reject it?
Well, that's certainly a consideration, but everything that's associated with commercial, beyond just traffic, the hours of activity, the noise, the lighting, the signage, the come and go nature of people attending the commercial businesses, all of those, in our mind, could have a potential negative effect on the adjacent residential. And it is worth noting that there are 2 brand-new single-family homes that are just being built directly adjacent to the west of this. So, as I think it was Ms. Bell or Ms. Olson stated, we feel that some type of residential is still a viable use for this property.
And I'm not, I know it's been referenced that a lawsuit was the reason that those 2 banks exist. Is there any more background? Like, what was the basis? Did we?
Just one lawsuit on corner.
So what were the circumstances that gave rise to banks being on either side, on the west side of?
On the north of this site, the bank, and then I believe there's a dentist office on the north side of Kavanaugh. That zoning's in place. It goes back decades. And the zoning action was as a result of court action that where they prevailed in their zoning application. I don't have the details with me, Commissioner Rahman, but both of those were court action. And of course, the PDO directly to the south, the bank building, when it came through this planning commission, it was denied, recommended for denial by this commission at the time that it was reviewed, then went to the board of directors where the board did approve it.
Maybe this is hypothetical, you can't answer, but if a bank were to come now and submit an application to use that same spot that is now subject to this application, what would be the basis for us denying that application?
If a bank was proposed?
Correct.
Again, our recommendation would be just as it was for the prior bank. We feel that the nature of the use of the property and everything associated with it, and feeling somewhat vindicated by our position on that, it was basically no time after that bank was built that we began receiving complaints about the noise and lights and traffic associated with the bank and its impact on those homes directly to the west. Those are concerns that this commission had when they reviewed that proposal at the time. We feel it would be the same kind of issue. There is a level of activity and noise and light and traffic associated with non-residential uses that we feel are not compatible adjacent to single family. There has to be a line drawn somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
University has in the past consistently been that line.
Understood. Thank you.
As I understand the staff's recommendation of denial, if it were all residential, you would not be denying it.
That's correct, and we've made it very clear as we've looked at this property and talked not just with this applicant, but with other applicants or potential applicants that were looking at this property. We recognize that it probably is not an appropriate site for traditional detached single-family residential fronting onto that that block of University and R. But something beyond that, the fourplex, 8-unit condominium type development, something more dense and beyond traditional single families. We have stated all along that we would support something that was along those lines.
Any other questions, comments? Mr. May? Then,
I don't remember the year, but I remember sitting out there with you when we talked about a service station, which is now Bank of America. I had a full head of hair. I don't know about Mr. Carney. Let's just say some years ago. I've been on this commission just short of 6 years, thank the good Lord. But in that time, we've turned down, this commission's turned down Regions Bank. Just recently, we turned down a restaurant possibility in the 2 houses facing Cantrell, west of University. I can't vote for this one anymore, and I voted against the other. Don't want to discourage you, but I've lost every time I voted. So you might want me to vote on the other side. But I'm against this for the very reasons. This is residential area, and I wouldn't want to live on Normandy and shake hands with the guy getting his daily cash out of there while I'm shaving in the morning. And that's what's happening to these folks. So I'm going to vote against this one again. Thank you.
Commissioner Berry.
Yeah, Commissioner May's right. You know, the history of properties along here on University between Kavanaugh and Cantrell on the west side, the Planning Commission has consistently and often unanimously voted down commercial zoning applications. So there is some precedent to that. Now, I don't necessarily believe in Maginot lines between segregating disparate uses, such as would office and institutional zoning be suitable in there. There was a church there, so I think there's transitional kinds of zoning. I can't support this application because of the traffic considerations there at R and University Street.
Mr. Vogel?
Yes, I appreciate everybody speaking their opinion on the matter, but I think this is a great bookend for the other side of the corridor there. If you go to the other side of the corridor, it's commercial from Cantrell back up to Kavanaugh, even on the other side of Kavanaugh. So I will be in support of this, but wanted to let y'all know my.
Any other comments, commissioners? All right, that motion would be in order.
Mr. Chairman, I move for approval of the of item A, including all staff comments and conditions except for that of denial.
There's a motion. Is there a second? Motion and a second. Just for the audience comments, the motions are waged or stated in an unusual way, which I appreciate. But if we hold up our hand on yes, we're for the motion. If not, it's no. But it's if you try to track the logic of the, you end up in lawyer heaven. So, with that, if you're in favor of the motion, raise your right hand. And if you're opposed, raise your right hand.
Three ayes, 7 noes, 1 absent. The application fails.
Thank you.
For those present in the room, the applicant can take this to the board of directors. They can appeal the action to the board.
And now, item B, if you take us through that, Mr. Kearney.
Good afternoon. My name is Brian Minyard. I'm with the City of Little Rock Planning and Development staff. I've appeared in front of some of you before, but some of you I have not. I'm here to present the item for the Heights Landscape Design Overlay District. That is item B on your agenda this evening. I'll be giving you a little bit of a background about how we got to this point and staff's involvement in it. And then the applicant has a team of people that will go through the why as to that item. At the request of the Heights Neighborhood Association meeting, we started meeting with them back in September of 2017 about this item. At that meeting, we talked about a wide variety of things: landscaping, parking in the front yard, architectural styles, etc. The neighborhood group continued to work on it, and in 2018, they presented a list of topics that they wanted us to address. And those topics had been boiled down to just tree preservation and implementation that you see very close to what you're seeing today. After that, staff researched different ordinances across the country as to what other cities do in this instance. We then drafted a tentative ordinance that looks very similar to the one that you're seeing today, that we as staff felt provided the most benefit for the neighborhood and yet did not reduce any buildable area on the sites. This went to Plans Committee meeting in January 2019. After Plans Committee, there were some changes to it. That draft was sent back to the Neighborhood Committee. They held a meeting, some edits were made. The map was actually edited to take out the area where the University of Arkansas owns there at just below Camac. That was taken out. And then in January 28th of this year, the HNA board approved that text draft as was at that time. Staff identified property owners and mailed over 2,100 letters to property owners on February 11, 2019. That day, we put the current draft as of then on the City of Little Rock website. The DOD's main goal is to have trees retained or planted in the front yards and those corner lots which have side streets also, to retain or plant trees along the side street also when new houses are built or additions to existing structures occur. The locations of the new trees are to be in those front and side yard setbacks for those that have corner lots. This will not reduce the size of any proposed house or addition. The proposed ordinance is not retroactive and only affects future residential additions or new construction. There's been a few changes since the very first time it was posted on the internet, and I will go over those for you now. One thing that's pretty significant is that originally it read, "These regulations shall apply to all lots zoned or occupied by single-family or two-family dwellings." We've added to that the exception of non-residentially occupied lots with conditional use permits. This removes churches, parks, schools, country clubs, etc. Those uses with conditional uses get a review from the Planning Commission when they come in and either establish their conditional use permit or revise it. So at that time, the Planning Commission is able to look at those items. The next thing that changed is that the threshold from 400 square feet was moved to 600 square feet. So it's actually a little bit of, it's less stringent than was originally. The next thing that was added is that we always had a section there for credits. So if you had a large tree and you were going to attempt to save that large tree, it would count for a 1-for-1 credit. So if you had 2 large trees in your front yard and you're going to save them, then you most likely, depending on the width of your lot, you satisfied your requirements. The change is that if you've got a 12-inch or greater DBH tree, diameter at breast height is here. If you've got a 12-inch tree that measures at that height above ground, the new revision says that that one tree will count for all of your requirement along either the front yard setback or the side yard setback. It's a big enough tree that the neighborhood association group thought that that would satisfy that. The next thing is that the size of the tree, the caliper, was moved from a 3-inch tree down to a 2.5-inch tree. The Heights Committee feels that the above 5 changes will make the ordinance less onerous to the community by exempting non-residential properties with conditional use permits such as churches, schools, clubs, etc., raising the threshold from a 400 square foot addition to a 600 square foot addition, allowing one tree of 12 inches or more diameter at breast height to satisfy the requirements for tree planting in that section, that setback, and reducing the size of the tree from 3 inches down to 2.5-inch caliper. When we posted on the internet, we put a little button so you could immediately just email me if you had comments on that. Between emails, a few site visits, a few letters, I've collected 160 comments from various people. I've gotten some duplicates, and those do not count in the 160. As of noon today, I was counting 77% in favor of the ordinance, 13% opposed, and 10% neutral. Those neutral ones either were asking questions or just stating things that weren't really attributable to support or non-support of the item. At this time, we can pass it to the Neighborhood Association representatives, if that's okay.
Hi, my name is Natalie Capps. Thanks for the opportunity to speak to you today. We are representing the Heights Neighborhood Association, and our neighborhood is a historic area with lots and lots of mature trees. We appreciate a lovely tree canopy, which is really what we're here to discuss today. A little bit of history here. Our neighborhood association was founded in 2003. We have 5 meetings a year, 4 of which are board meetings, 1 general meeting of the Heights Neighborhood Association. Anyone is open to come to these meetings, and I'll describe a little bit more about that in a little bit. There are 26 board members. They represent the different areas that make up the Heights Neighborhood Association, and we have approximately 540 members, residential members to date, 35 business members to date. And in an effort to engage our neighbors who are not members of the Heights Neighborhood Association, each January a hand-delivered letter is dropped on each and every home's doorstep that says when exactly the meeting dates are, and you can see that they're highlighted on the little side note here on what's delivered to each house. On the back side is an annual report of what's happened from the previous year through the Neighborhood Association. There's an invitation to join the association, to join an email list, a Facebook group, a website also is linked there. So the Neighborhood Association has invested about $500,000 in our neighborhood. And what we're concerned about today, and the proposal that we're bringing forward, is discussing our concerns over the reduction of the tree canopy. So we're very pleased to have our neighborhood be a desirable place to live. We think that's a wonderful thing. We love that people want to move into our neighborhoods, people want to raise their kids, and we're happy about that. But as a result of that, lifestyles are changing. Smaller bungalows are moving to be larger houses that now accommodate new lifestyles. And when we're having that development into our neighborhood, many of the trees are being torn down. So that is really the problem at hand, that we are seeing the reduction of our tree canopy. So we have both neighbors who are developing land, and then sort of a new phenomenon in the last several years, which is that we've had an influx of developers. And the general model is that they purchase a small bungalow, they clear cut the lot, they build a larger house that's for profit, obviously, which is a good business model. But unfortunately, their for-profit business model doesn't align with the neighbors and the neighborhood's needs. And you'll see lots of pictures in this, and I will say that each one of these pictures represents a lot that is currently clear cut. And you can imagine as this happens over and over again, you really begin to get a pretty significant reduction in the tree canopy. So a couple development examples here. This is adjacent to our neighborhood school. That big block kind of in the center is Forest Park Elementary. And in September of 2017, a developer purchased 8 lots. And 2 of those 8 have been developed. So 1700 and 1704 North Polk have both been developed with new houses on them. The lots were cleared of all trees, and then problematic for us neighbors, no trees were replanted. So the canopy has been reduced significantly. You can see 1712 currently has a sign in it, ready for development, and I can only imagine that that tree will be removed and not replaced per the current pattern with this developer. And then lots of just examples here. This was a previous, you can kind of see before and after. So 1 home on 2 lots on Fillmore, then replaced with 2 homes with no trees. This is a house, or previously 4 lots on Stonewall with pretty significant canopy that's been completely raked. And those lots sit empty, and the current house does not yet have any landscaping, so we're unsure of their intentions for tree replanting. More clear cutting on Stonewall, North Pierce, South Grandview, and these are all current, and then also Beacon and Arthur. And we kind of show you all these pictures because they represent, if you're unfamiliar with these streets, a variety of places within our neighborhood to show that it really is problematic amongst the whole neighborhood footprint for which this design overlay would apply. So this we have as a picture because, you know, these are nice homes. We're happy to have the addition of probably the families that intend to live in these. But unfortunately, after they were built, there are no trees, which is the problem. So the origin overlays, or the overlay origin, excuse me, I was not even a Heights member or a Heights Neighborhood Association member. I was a neighbor who had heard rumblings of concerns amongst my neighbors for a while and thought maybe I should do something about it. So I tried to figure out where to go, and it seemed like the Neighborhood Association was the natural place. So in July of 2017, I went to the Neighborhood Association, asked this question, asked if anyone was concerned about this, and they did, in fact, create a committee to try and explore this problem. And Brian's done a pretty good job describing our process. We began working with the city in September and have been really trying to do our due diligence to make sure that all aspects of and all interested parties have been thought of and represented here. So the committee reported to the Heights Neighborhood Association at each and every meeting. We also regularly discussed with Kathy Webb, who is our representative on the city board. The Heights Neighborhood Association represents our neighbors, but we also thought, who are our democratically elected representatives? So we've contacted each of those, and they are all also in favor of this, and that includes Representative Andrew Collins, Senator Will Bond, Director Kathy Webb, former Representative Clark Tucker, and Justice of the Peace and neighbor Tyler Denton. Brian talked a little bit about some of the changes that we have made, and that really reflects us hearing concerns from neighbors, and we feel very proud that we were able to change each and every concern that the city heard from the neighbors, and that's the iterations and the track changes that you see within the proposal. So this really is a reasonable, common sense, accommodating proposal. It applies only when you apply for a demolition or construction permit for an addition more than 600 square feet. It requires 1 tree per 40 feet of street frontage, 2.5 caliper or greater, and to give you a general idea of what that looks like, we've got a picture of an H&A member next to a tree. Again, as Brian described, if it's 12 inches or greater, that's going to meet your tree requirements for the entire lot. So it doesn't restrict tree removal at all, but it does require either retaining or planting trees with construction. So I think it's important to sort of examine what this does and does not. So it does encourage and reward keeping existing trees. It does give credit for preservation. It does allow for planting if preservation is not possible. What this does not do is restrict development, restrict tree removal, restrict home design or architecture choices. And this will be tied to the city's current multi-step, multi-inspection process for new construction. It will essentially be a new checkbox, like did they meet their tree requirement? And we hope as a result of it already being integrated into a current process, the expense will be minimal. We feel strongly that the proposal accommodates new development, homeowners' rights, and neighbors and neighborhoods' needs. And we did ask our neighbors, and these numbers are a little bit outdated. I'm going to say the numbers that Brian just said to you again. So 2,100 letters sent out, 21 in opposition total, 123, I believe, I hope this is right, that said that they were for this proposal. And then in addition to that, we thought let's have a petition and really see the strength of the support in our neighborhood. And I've dropped the petition in front of you. You can see the neighbors' signatures and many comments that say similar things time and time again. The updated count as of noon today is 361 in favor on the petition. So we're happy that that really reflects our neighborhood support. In addition to those 361, 2 were developers, and we feel like that speaks to the strength of the options within this proposal. So if this is approved, it's going to join 11 other overlay districts in the neighborhood or in the city, and you can see that 6 of those already have some kind of tree or landscape requirement. And then I'll just close here with some pictures of homes in our neighborhood that already meet the tree requirement, and these are all new construction that we're able to keep 1 tree. Often there's that one great tree kind of on the edge of the lot. It's cleared because it's easier for a builder, but there's really no reason why we shouldn't be encouraging people to keep those. And there's one more. And then I will defer to the opposition. We'll save our time for later. Thank you for your time.
I have 4 more cards in favor of it.
And are we allowed to hear opposition and finish later? Is that correct?
You can. You've got 10 more minutes left.
Yeah, great. Thank you.
All right. Kevin Crass? And then Ms. Buchanan will be after that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the commission. My name is Kevin Crass. I practiced law here in Little Rock with Friday, Ehlers and Clark for 35 years. And for those 35 years, I've lived in 3 different houses in the Heights. I'm here today not only on behalf of myself, but also some residents who could not be here today. One in particular asked that he be identified, and that's Mr. Joe Ford, who has lived in that area for a long time and is currently in the process of remodeling a home on Jackson Street as well. I compliment Ms. Capps on her presentation. She anticipated some of the criticism that I have of the process, and I suspect that's why she spent so much time defending the efforts of the Heights Neighborhood Association. Someone asked me today or yesterday, was this going to be contentious? And I hope not, because we're talking about friends here, we're talking about neighbors here, and we're talking about people who have really the same goal. Nobody is in here saying we want to eliminate the tree canopy of the Heights district. And nobody is saying we want to destroy the character of the Heights neighborhood. But what we do disagree about is the severity of the problem, despite the pictures of probably less than 15 houses, 20 houses. And we disagree about the process by which we're here, and we disagree with the solution. And that all falls in your lap, obviously, at this time. Ms. Capps talked about the Heights Neighborhood Association, so let me go there. It is true, we know now from looking back at their minutes, and I had to get them through the association because they were not all posted on the website. And we know now through their annual report that they've been working on this for a long time. Mr. Minyard, who's been closely in hand working with them, although I understand the staff's not taking a position on this, was involved in this from 2017. The minutes reflect and the notes reflect that they actually wanted to talk about a historic district to prohibit these tear downs, and that got nixed. And then they went to this idea of trees, and we ended up with this ordinance, proposed ordinance. So let's talk about what happened in terms of those of us who don't regularly attend the Heights Neighborhood Association meetings, who don't regularly get their emails, or the thousands of people in the Heights who are not members of the Heights Neighborhood Association. The Heights Neighborhood Association worked with Kathy Webb, worked with Brian Minyard, and developed this, and never gave copies of the proposed ordinance to either the members of the association or the residents of the neighborhood who were not members. They put on your picture, and I have a copy of it myself, their annual report in February or January of this year said or maybe last year, we are working with Kathy Webb to develop an ordinance, a draft ordinance. But none of us saw a copy of the ordinance until we got that notice from the city, and that didn't actually have the ordinance. It had a link to the ordinance. It frankly looked like junk mail. And I didn't pick up on it when it first came home till someone said, did you see the letter from the city? And so this idea that the Heights Neighborhood Association has included all of us in this is just flat out false. I don't attribute one iota of ill will or ill motive to them. They're active volunteers in the association, and they do good work. As I told them Monday, I agree with some of the things they do. But they are not here speaking on behalf of the residents who will be affected by this design overlay district. I don't need to tell you that in the history of the Heights, which happens to be the most valuable real estate in this city and has been for a long time, we have never had a design overlay district, not once in over 100+ years. And so when you come forward with a design overlay district, it is a major policy change in my view, in city ordinances and planning and zoning, and it ought not to be entered into lightly or decided by a group that talks about it in a small group and then pops it out and says, this is what we're for, and then says, oh, you should have known about it. So we do object to the process by which we're here. And I did a lot of research. Mr. Minyard said they did some research on other ordinances. And in a lot of cities, the design overlay district is the subject of a long study led by the city and its professional staff, and oftentimes subject to basically a referendum among the residents of the affected district. For example, there was a law passed this session where it says in a design overlay district you have to have a signature of the majority of the residents of that district. Now, I'm not saying that's applicable here, but going forward there are some zoning requirements where a DOD you will have to have an affirmative opt-in on behalf of a majority, and as you know, we don't really even know whether a majority of the people even got notice about this. To their credit, when they heard complaints that it might apply to a large country club, to churches, and to parks, and that the add-on was too small, they pulled it back. And I commend them for that. But that doesn't make it a reasonable and good ordinance. It makes it more reasonable. Another thing to consider, and again, this is something Mr. Ford has talked to me about a lot, is if this is such a great idea, why would we just apply it to the Heights? Why wouldn't we apply it to the city? And the answer I got at the meeting the other night was, well, the trees that we're requiring be planted are too expensive for people that don't live in the Heights. And I don't believe that. I don't believe that. I think what they said to me was, we don't want a little sampling from Walmart to be able to satisfy the requirement. That's exactly her words. And so the point is, it's only applicable to this one neighborhood. Now, let's go through the DOD. And Chairman Latour, I appreciated your comment about lawyer heaven, but I'm a lawyer and I can't do anything about it. But I suggest to the staff and to others that you actually go through the ordinance. And it's easy to say this is all that's going to be required, because we're all here today and everybody hears that and everybody says, okay, I get it. Little tree, plant it here, plant it there. But the words are important, because there's going to be folks in years to come that only have the words. They don't have the presentations. And so we say in this ordinance that the department will review the plans, the building plans. So let's make sure everybody understands how this works. If I buy a lot and I pay a lot of money for it, I want to build a house, a new house, and I tear it down, I submit a building plan. Under this ordinance, I've got to have a landscape plan. And if I don't get approval from the city, then my building permit's not going to be issued. I can't build the house. We all understand how this is going to work. But this says, in order, the department will review the plans for consistency with the detailed requirements of this ordinance. That's clear. We're talking about satisfying the requirements in this ordinance. But the sentence goes on and says, and consistency with the tree canopy of the district. That's in the eye of the beholder. I don't even know what that means. And the ordinance actually says at the top, and again, this sort of begs the question, in order to be compatible with the tree canopy of the neighborhood, new construction to existing structures shall comply with the following criteria. But it doesn't list any criteria. It just tells you what the ordinance requires. So I suggest to you that the ordinance in operation is going to be more costly than she presented. She said minimal cost. So there are going to be people down here every month, after having gone through this building permit process, that ask you for a variance. And that's going to add cost. And so I would say to you, one of the questions that I would have if I were sitting where you sit is, how much is this going to cost the city? If the answer is, I don't know, I don't think you ought to vote for it. You ought to ask that question and have that determined. And then as it plays out, think about this. I have a house at the corner of Spruce and Country Club. So I'm a corner. If I tear the house down, then I got this tree requirement. If I don't tear the house down, I can mow every tree down I want to, and there's no requirement for me to replace them. So we're going to end up with two classes of residents in this neighborhood. Those that are subject to this DOD and those that aren't. And in 10 years, the city is going to have to sort out which one's subject to it and which one isn't. Today it sounds simple, right? We got pictures of all of those that might be subject to them. But in a year or 2 or 10 years, so I think the ordinance in terms of its practicality has some issues with it. So Mr. Minyard, when he went and visited with the Heights Neighborhood Association early in this process, brought up what's called the Private Property Act of 2015. It's a state law that I'm sure you're familiar with that says a certain restriction on the ability to use your land as you see fit. And let's back up and just say, what we're talking about doing is passing a new law applicable only to the people in this neighborhood, which does in fact restrict the ability to do what you want to do with your private property. Now, that may not mean something to everybody in this room, but it's a strong statement in our history. We have always had the right to property, cannot be taken away from you without due process of law. And he raised the question, you got to make sure this ordinance doesn't violate that law, or what happens? The city may owe money for an illegal taking. Now, am I here today to tell you that there is going to be liability? No, that's not my role. That's the city attorney's role. But if I were sitting in your seat, I would say, does this potentially expose the city to liability for taking of private property? And if you don't know the answer to that, I suggest you shouldn't vote for this today. I have also talked to certain experts in the gardening area, some that are nationally recognized that live here, and they have questions about the species that are listed and those that aren't listed, and there should be trees that are totally off the list, even for potential variants. To use a poor pun, that's over my head. I don't know a whole lot about trees and species, but the point I'm making is I think it would be helpful in this process, like is done in other cities, for this staff to have led an open discussion, bring in experts, let's get it right before we place this restriction on people's personal property rights. And I'm about to use up my time, and I'll yield to Ms. Buchanan. Let me just look at one or two notes. You know, I think this is primarily driven by what Ms. Capps said, that phenomenon in our neighborhood is that these smaller houses are torn down, larger ones are built. And she mentioned these developers. You hear a lot of people say that's why they're for this petition. They think it's actually going to limit these tear downs and rebuilds. But as she honestly said, this ordinance is not intended to do that. And what I think is kind of the herd mentality with this petition, and again, the petition didn't, well, the part I saw didn't actually explain the ordinance. It just said, are you for preserving trees? I'm for preserving trees, but I'm against this ordinance. But the developers, I was asked the other night, and it's a fair question, what do you propose as an alternative? If you've got these developers that have signed on to doing it pursuant to the requirements of this ordinance, in other words, they're going to voluntarily plant trees, we don't need government imposing a law, a restriction on private property. The market and peer pressure of the neighborhood, which has worked for over 100 years to preserve this neighborhood, will do it again. And so I suggest what we ought to do is vote this down, continue to study it, open the discussion to those that are for it passionately, those that are opposed to government intervention, and everybody in between whose property rights will be affected. So I would urge the commission to vote this down tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kress. Francis Buchanan.
Thank you, sir, and thank you all for giving me an opportunity to speak. There's no question that I love big old trees. There's no question that I love my neighborhood. I live at the other end of a block on the same street that I was born on. And unlike Mr. Bill May, I do still have most of my hair, but let me tell you, it was a long time ago. And I've seen a lot of old trees come and go. I am not opposed at all to a tree ordinance of some kind, but I don't think that enough scientific facts have been taken into account in thinking about trees. A lot of the trees in our neighborhood are what I call on life support. I have consulted arborists and people from the Arkansas Forestry Commission about trees at numerous sites where I've lived over the years. Here are some facts. A lot of the big trees, maybe a majority of them in our neighborhood that we get so nostalgic about, are on what I call life support. They are artificially watered, they are artificially fed, and sometimes stuffed with cement to stay upright and somewhat alive. They pose a real hazard in wet, windy weather, as we've seen on multiple occasions when we've seen roofs crashed in. And so there's often a lot of debate when you're asking someone, should we save this tree or not, whether it should even be saved. Number two, almost any kind of construction, sometimes within 50 feet of a tree, can kill it, but sometimes over a space of 5 years. So your choice sometimes, if you're going to build on even a 100-foot lot, is, are we going to construct a house at all? Because the mere fact of construction is going to kill that tree. Then let's assume that just take for granted the premise that we're going to lose a lot of these trees in construction, and that some of them probably need to be lost. When is the best time to replace trees? Because I'm all for it. I've participated in habitat house, tree plantings, all kinds of things. It's often not during construction, most of the time not during construction, and often not soon after construction, and I'll tell you why. There are chemicals used in any kind of construction material that are very hazardous to trees. And you often do tree planting a great service to wait 6 months, a year, sometimes 2 years. Go ahead and plant some shrubs, but wait on the tree planting because they're not going to make it. And it's going to be a waste of time, money, and effort. And how does this ordinance even fit those circumstances? Who's going to come back and check to see if the tree made it? Is the owner going to be responsible for trying again? What's required of him in terms of maintenance during that delicate time? Is he going to feed it and water it and do all the things that it takes in extraordinary circumstances to make a tree grow? Often it's terrifically futile. And like I said, better to plant some shrubs across the front, make it acceptable looking to everybody, and then plant trees a lot later. So in some of these houses, new houses you're seeing where there are no trees, it's just because somebody's being smart and they're waiting a reasonable length of time before they put a new tree in the ground. Just this last year, I lost a tree and was real sad about it because of construction, one house down, because walls had been built on the perimeter of that yard. And the chemicals from the construction of that wall killed my tree. This is something that all of these things have nothing to do with nostalgia. They have to do with the way trees work and don't work. And yes, trees have lifespans, just like plants and animals, other trees. Sometimes they're 25 years, like our Bradford pears, thank the Lord, they're going to die. Sometimes they're like the redwoods, but a lot of the trees in our neighborhood have outlived their normal lifespan, and they're going to go if there's any disturbance at all, and we can't cover that with a simple ordinance. Thank you very much for giving me your time and attention.
Thank you, commissioners, for hearing this debate. My name is Thompson Murray. I live in the Heights, and I'm grateful for those who did this hard work of generating this ordinance. I'm not one of those people, but I am here to cheer them on. I am for this. I kind of came late to the process, but I am all for it because I remember. I don't remember a lot of things from 1996, but I remember the day that I drove to Little Rock to find a house. We were moving to Little Rock from another city here in Arkansas, and a trusted friend had said you should try to find a house in the Heights. And I remember I remember what it felt like to pull onto North Grant Street. And it felt like I was driving through this green tunnel, lit up with azaleas and dogwoods, and we went to see this house. The house was not much, but we were blown away by the beauty of that street, and it was springtime, and so the house was small, it was expensive, but we realized we weren't just buying a single piece of property, that we were buying into a neighborhood, and it was worth the price because of that. People value different things, but in my opinion, one of the things that makes the Heights so attractive is this canopy of mature oak trees, and it's this canopy that provides, picturesque settings for beautiful homes. It provides this great shade for people who just love walking on the street, and we also have these neighbors that live in the trees, the birds, the squirrels, maybe people, I don't know, but, I recognize there's a need for new construction, for remodeling, but it is essential to build in some minimal requirements to maintain the green character of our neighborhood. We've recently had 2 lots on our block clear cut, and honestly, it just feels like we've had a couple of teeth knocked out of our, our neighborhood smile. And so, this canopy is valuable and it's threatened. Without these minimal requirements, the character of the neighborhood is going to change. It's going to become a lot less green, a lot more exposed to the heat of the sun. It will become a harsher environment. And I urge you to pass this very reasonable ordinance. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, for what it's worth, you guys have 7 more minutes. There's 4 more cards, so you can do the math on that.
Okay. I'm Emily Pennell. I've lived in the Heights for 19 years, and the Heights was founded as a city park over 100 years ago. People came to the Heights to enjoy the cool air and our higher elevation, and our old trees are a legacy of our neighborhood history, and they give our neighborhood character and charm and beauty. Trees help control flooding and reduce erosion. We're losing these large root systems, and we're losing permeable ground due to lots of new construction, and so we're seeing a lot of runoff, and the city has actually been having to invest in the drainage system in our neighborhood. One of our neighbors shared this picture, and she's lived here 20 years. In the last 10 years, she's seen a substantial increase in runoff. It's damaging her home, and she's expecting that that's going to get worse for others. Trees reduce heat and provide shade, and they reduce energy costs for all of us. Laura S. said on our petition, our quality of life is inextricably linked to the quality of our environment. We need to keep Little Rock green and healthy. I mean, we all know how hot Arkansas summers are. Many of our neighbors enjoy running, biking, walking their dogs, walking their babies, and shade makes this more accessible for people. Mayor Scott serves on the Metro Plan Board, and one of their goals is to improve pedestrian options. They provide wildlife habitat. Michael, on our petition, talked about how when the lot next to him was clear-cut, the wildlife had to migrate. Trees give us clean air. As Laura Kay says, our kids need to grow up with tree houses, hammocks, and oxygen. And of course, they're beautiful. As Mark S. said, we believe tree-lined streets are one of the major attractions of this neighborhood. So you've heard tonight about government intrusion, and that's why an attorney has been hired to fight this. It's really not about the trees. It's about the government is telling us what to do on my private property. Well, we disagree. When you build a home, you have to pay the city a permit. I just got a permit for a remodel I'm doing, and you have to follow this set of extensive codes. That's part of living in a community. Your processes, your codes, your permits, your inspections, they are what keep our neighborhoods healthy and safe. If people didn't follow electrical code, we're all at risk of fire. If people didn't, follow plumbing code, we could have sewage in the streets. We appreciate the work that you do to keep our neighborhoods safe, and we believe that protecting our tree canopy is part of having a healthy, livable neighborhood. We think this proposal aligns really well with your mission, which is enhancing quality of life, encouraging quality growth, stabilizing neighborhoods, land use controls, historic preservation, permitting. We believe that our tree canopy falls into all of these categories. Clear cutting can make the builder's job a little easier. They can get their trucks in and out easier, but the neighbors are the ones left with the fallout, and we lose these things. And really, you can still clear cut under this proposal. You could still clear cut. We're just asking you to put 2 trees back on a 50-foot lot. If you have a side lot, you might have to put up 4 trees. We're not asking for very much. This is very accommodating to new development. And while Merritt comes up, I'd like to ask everybody in the room who's here in support of this to please stand.
Hi, my name is Merritt Dake. I've lived in the Heights for about 6 years. I've owned one house. I'm renting a house currently, and I'm in the process of building a house, of which I have kept several trees in the lot. I think like everybody has said, it's hard to fathom that people don't want trees. I mean, it's a pretty straightforward thing. I think where I come from is maybe partially from a spot of naivety, and definitely not a spot from a just detailed technical argument on why this makes sense, because I come at it from maybe a moderation standpoint, that I can make an argument for either side. Personal property rights can be affected by individuals. They can be affected by government. I tend to think of myself as probably slightly more on the less regulation is better side of things. What I have realized is that a little bit of moderate regulation seems to provide really kind of that balance between the people that don't like it and the people that do, to make sure that from a very practical perspective, property values stay high. Kind of the uses of what the neighborhood are, stay what they were true to be. I think, I'm pretty new to this argument, maybe 2 or 3 weeks. I did get the notice in the mail. I knew about it. Honestly, I was frankly surprised to hear that people had an issue with it. And so I started doing a little bit of just looking on some of these other cities that have these ordinances in place, and for the most part, you do see them citywide. I think when you look at them, they are probably 250. Okay, all right. I'll make this clear. I mean, they're more invasive than these are. So I looked from a reasonableness perspective only and said, hey, this makes a lot of sense. It's not impairing my ability to build in this lot, and we're going to take up most of the lot because economics kind of require you to in this market. So in any case, I think I just ask everybody to kind of look at it from a reasonableness perspective, and appreciate you guys' time and support.
Thank you, Norman Hodges.
I'm deferring to whoever's next.
Ruth Bell.
The league is supportive of the concept of design overlays because it enables neighborhoods and communities to carry forward aspects of their particular home environment that they think are very important and unique to their own community. I think you've heard that from all these people here who've been talking about trees. So because of that, we hope you will approve this DOD. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bell. Actually, you've got 2 more minutes if you go to. Thank you very much for both sides. Staff, unless I'm wrong, we're not approving an ordinance. We're recommending to the city board, which is the approving
That's correct. You're just making a recommendation. You're not on this level determining whether the ordinance is legal or not. That's up to the city attorney. You're just here to hear both sides, listen to the staff's presentation, and make a recommendation. You're not judges, and you just listen to what everyone says and make your best decision.
Got it. Commissioners, comments? Mr. Berry?
Yeah, I have a question for 2 members of staff, city attorney and then Brian. I'll say the attorney first, the easiest one. Is there anything in this ordinance that raises red flags for you as a taking issue at this point? I
discussed it with Tom earlier. We didn't see anything glaring. I know the Mitchell Law Firm, and I enjoyed your presentation. Oh, I'm sorry, Friday Elder and Clark. I just said Mitchell. Yeah. But
okay.
Tom doesn't see anything glaring at this level
okay.
that you should be concerned with, because once again, this is merely a recommendation, okay. And this ordinance may not be the final ordinance okay. that gets passed by the board of directors. They may be doing changes on their level.
Okay. Thank you. And Brian, I just have a question about the process. A lot of things were said and characterized. How many design overlay districts do we have in the city, approximately, ballpark?
I believe we have 11.
11. The purpose of those are things unique to those neighborhoods. That's why they're not citywide.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. They're very unique. They're tailored, crafted individually for those neighborhoods.
And would you say design overlays are different from different neighborhoods, from Hillcrest to?
They're very different in length and scope and items covered.
Okay. Would you, I'm not going to ask you to characterize the process here, but the meeting, this discussion been going for 2 years, is that correct?
As I know of, I met with them in September of 17.
Okay,
So,
started then.
Year and a half at least.
And then the neighborhood-wide meetings were public meetings, is that correct?
I cannot answer to that. I cannot answer to that.
Commissioner, the first time they called a neighborhood meeting was Monday.
Excuse me, Mr. Grass, if you would, you have to get to a mic because we record these meetings, please. Thank you.
And this is the first time they called a meeting for the neighborhood, for the members, was Monday. They've never called a meeting for the entire neighborhood, meaning people who aren't members. And when they called the meeting for the membership on Monday, they made it very clear they had already made up their mind and there was never going to be a vote.
Mr. Chair, this is a very serious allegation he's made. Can I have the neighborhood president speak to that?
Sure.
Thank you.
I'm happy to speak to that. We have made very clear from the beginning that this was a Heights Neighborhood Association board project representing over along 550 or so people. The planning staff asked us several months ago to hold some sort of general meeting for the membership, which is what we had on Monday night. The public meeting, or at least went out to the 2,100 people and said there will be a public meeting on this at the Planning Commission. So we were never notified we needed to have anything for a neighborhood-wide prospect meeting. We were following the request of the Planning Commission to have a meeting, a public meeting for the members of the Heights Association, and this has been all along. Everything we've ever said, HNA board. We certainly think we represent the Heights because we represent all 8 neighborhoods in the Heights. And I'm here to tell you, we have discussed this with hundreds of people over that period of time. So, and all of our meetings are public. So if they're online.
Thank you. I just have one comment or two to make before we vote, and I suspect the commissioners may have other comments. Thank you, Brian. I mean, this is not the first time opposition parachutes in at the 11th hour. And this time, very high legal octane, of course, that's been hired. But, and that's fine, that's what this process is for. But I find some arguments disingenuous, and that this is, what I'm finding is cities like Nashville, by the way, which are high growth, high competitive cities, have a ordinance like this probably a little stricter than what the Heights is. On the spectrum of design overlays, this is a very benign regulatory one. As someone mentioned about moderate ordinances, I look at economic and regulatory reasonableness. The economics of canopy, it's been proven beyond a shadow of a doubt that hedonically in real estate, canopy trees increase the price of property. So I don't see a taking issue. And 2 is that this is a very benign ordinance. You know, the new mayor wants to be like cities of Nashville. This is consistent with that viewpoint. This is that kind of ordinance. So I'm going to be supporting that ordinance.
Commissioner May.
I know lawyers don't get out too much. They work so many hours. I knew about this meeting, and I live in Leawood.
Don't get me wrong, since it's been accused of being disingenuous. I'm not saying we weren't aware of this meeting. I'm saying that we didn't have any input into this process.
I'm just saying that Dixon Flake, who many of you know, said one of the kindest things I've ever been said about us on the Planning Commission. We don't get very many kind things said about us, by the way, and we work for free. But he said, just use common sense on this board. Now, common sense says if you ride down North Taylor, you know something needs to be done. Whether you're a lawyer or whether you live in Leawood, something needs to be done, and as a starting point for everything. And what we do is listen to your concern. My kids live in the Heights. I see it every day. We're making a recommendation. I think this is wonderful what y'all are doing, and the recommendations have been started, and I'm no vote for it.
Commissioner Ramon.
A couple of questions to help me understand sort of where we are. Now, who is the applicant for this particular ordinance? Is that even how it works?
We were requested by the Heights Neighborhood Association group to start this process.
So is there a recommendation from the proposing body regarding one way or the other?
The city at this point, since this is our public meeting, we was hoping to get, and we did, opinions on both sides. So at this time, staff has not formed and put an opinion out. An opinion will be made prior to the city board hearing.
So to be clear, the planning commission doesn't have the recommendation of the staff upon which it depends. I mean, if that's how it's worked, if that's how it's intended to work, that's fine. I'm just trying to understand.
That's how this one is. Since it is a ordinance, that's going to go for the board, and this is just a recommendation. And we address this one as being just a public hearing for you to hear, everything from both sides of it, and voice your opinion of what this is and vote for that, for your recommendation.
Okay. Second question, there was some suggestion that the process itself was flawed, and particularly as to the notice requirements. When you're proposing, when you're putting together an ordinance like this, is there a formal notice process through which you must, send out notices, a certain number of days before the public hearing, or a certain number of days before you reach a final draft of the ordinance? I mean, what is the process for notifying the entire?
Our process that we followed on this one is very, very similar to the one that we followed before on other design overlay districts. I've been the lead staff person on some revisions and some creating design overlay districts from scratch. And as usual, we search the Pulaski County Tax Assessor's records, and we send out notices to all property owners that we can find, and we did that in this example. We sent out the notice for the 6 weeks ago Planning Commission agenda, and then it was deferred till this one. So the notice that went out to 2,100 property owners, we're notifying them of the Planning Commission meeting, which is typical of what we do.
So, to the extent there was a formal notice requirement, you follow that.
Right, because we notify, we publish in a newspaper the Planning Commission agenda.
Okay.
And that satisfies our notice.
Who, to the extent the ordinance is going to impose some sort of incremental cost, either on the homeowner or on the city itself, who would have the responsibility for determining that incremental cost?
Well, that's a somewhat little bit of a broad question, because the cost will also depend on incremental on what the improvements they're looking to put on there and the size of their lot, for it, because there is a range of trees as proposed in the caliper that, was presented. So cost of trees will vary by the size and also by the species of the tree. So if you're looking at 2 trees, it depends on who they hire, how they plant them. We didn't mandate who plants them, or that. And so that cost could be, $500, $1,000, $1,500 per tree. It just all depends on what you buy, that goes in there and how you get it installed. I don't know who they're going to hire for the installer, that goes in there. Now, as far as after the fact, I think you asked about cost after, for, I guess that'd be for us, for enforcement. Well, we're already out there. This is specifically tied to a building permit, for that. So that's that 600 square foot requirement. So we're going to be out there doing the final inspection. So it'll be tied to that building permit inspection to receive their final CO. So we will already be there. So there is no incremental cost for us inspecting for that.
I guess my question was more about the process itself. I mean, whatever the cost is, whose job is it to sort of figure out or understand what those costs are? Is it already at the formative stage? Is that already supposed to have occurred? Or is it not even part of the process and that's not something you have to consider as you develop the ordinance?
Well, what are you asking for costs for? If you're asking for regards to an impact on the property?
That would be part of the cost component, correct?
Well, when we looked at that cost component was cost incurred by the property owner, because you're specifically talking about the act that Mr. Krass, called about or spoke about earlier. He didn't mention the percentage of it. That act does not kick in until it gets to a 20% stage of what that value is.
That's for the taking, though, right?
That's for the taking. That's when it kicks in, and that's
I'm not too concerned about that.
So I can't speak for that because I don't know what the property is, what the value is.
I guess, okay. Well, my only other comment is just, look, I spent a great deal of my life in Atlanta, and if you think that this ordinance is overburdensome, you've never spent any time in Atlanta. They have a true tree ordinance. And I guess my only other comment is that the argument that the invisible hand of the market is somehow going to protect 100 years of success 100 years from now does not resonate with me particularly well. I do think that there needs to be some type of, control of growth and some sort of, a vision for the future. And I think this is a pretty low burden type of ordinance. And, look, I'm a lawyer too, and I look at the statute and I think that there are opportunities to improve it. And I guess that's really my last question. Is there, between now and when the board sees it, will additional red lines be floated? Will additional comments be made to?
They're going to take the Planning Commission's recommendations. You have the ability, as Planning Commission, and if you've heard from the public, to make your own recommendations as to how you want to change this ordinance. And then they will take your input. They will take the citizens' input. Tom, the city attorney, will do a thorough review of the ordinance, and then he will make, based upon your recommendations in the communities, as well as staff research, do a final product for the board of directors.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yes. I think to address Mr. Krass's concern on the, did a commissioner or commissioners talk to staff about the implications and the expenses? Yes. Commissioner Haynes and I were at the Subdivision Committee meeting on April 17th. That was a topic of conversation that I did bring up with the staff, Public Works, and City Beautification at that time. So, trying to do the due diligence necessary to figure out what, needs to happen here. And I think being a resident in the Heights, a new resident, having great grandparents who lived up there and grandparents and great aunts and uncles and parents who have lived up there, this is not something that I took lightly. Certainly look across the room and see many familiar faces. So it's not something that, I went into quietly and did not have discussion about or with people. Have many concerns from varying different people across the neighborhood. I think you've heard from the commissioners about what they see, and I see it as well. This isn't too heavy of a burden, but I think it is important for us as commissioners to realize that we are a planning commission. We're trying to look for the future. We're not a reactionary commission, and this is a commendable effort by citizens who want to see change in their area, and not everybody's going to get on board. We've been here enough times to see that there are going to be for and against issues. So anyway, I just wanted to make sure I communicated what has been on my mind the last several weeks since receiving my notification.
Commissioner May.
We're getting way ahead of ourselves on this thing. All I was told to do is look, is this a good idea to get started? Yes. And we don't know what the board's going to come up with. They may say, this is it, and they may say, forget it, this ain't happening. We don't have that vote. That's their vote. But is this a good starting point? Yes, that's what I want, how I'm going to vote.
Mr. Brock?
I don't live in the Heights. I'm nowhere near the Heights. I'm out in Southwest. I can tell you, I wish this ordinance were citywide. And if the city directors had any salt about them, they'd make it citywide. Thank you.
Any other comments? Shelter. Gotta wake him up.
This is something new, I know. I move that we approve the recommendation put before us today, including all staff comments and conditions. How's that? What would be the proper wording?
I would just suggest to make a motion to approve as presented.
I move that we approve this as presented.
Is there a second? Second. Any other discussion? No. Hearing none, if you're in favor of it, raise your right hand. Thank you. Item 3. We're good. 5 minutes. All right. Thank you for that little break. Let's resume. Let the record show Commissioner Thomas had to go and Commissioner Stebbins will be back. Item 3.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, item 5 was on the consent agenda, and we pulled that because we thought there had been a card turned in opposition to it, but I was informed by Vice Chair Stebbins that was a mistake, that in fact there was not a card turned in opposition to item 5. With your approval, I'd like to go ahead and just read that item, and if we could deal with it.
I thought we left item 5 on because I asked the gentleman if he wanted to speak, and he said
no. No, sir, we pulled item 5, and it did not get included in the consent agenda.
Okay, please do item 5.
Item 5 is recommended for approval by staff. File Z4029C. This is Orion Federal Credit Union, short form PDO, located at 1019 North University Avenue. Staff recommends approval of the requested PDO subject to compliance with the comments and conditions outlined in paragraphs D, E, and F, and the staff analysis in the agenda staff report. As a note, the applicant did submit revised plans for the retaining wall showing curved sections to comply with section 29-210.
All right, that's is there a motion to add that to the consent agenda or to approve that?
Yes, I move we move item 5 to the consent agenda.
Approve item.
Or approve item 5.
Is there a second? Second, any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of adding item 5 to the consent agenda, raise your hand. Those opposed, thank you so much. Item 3.
Mr. Chairman, item 3, file number S867-Z8, Fitzroy Promenade Subdivision Site Plan Review, property located at the northeast corner of Rawling Road and St. Vincent Way. This is property that was before this commission November the 15th of 2018. It was a request to rezone it from C2 to C3. Went to the Board of Directors December 3rd, 2018, and was approved for C3 zoning by ordinance number 21-653. The current application before the Planning Commission is approval of a subdivision multiple building site plan review for a 4-building phased multifamily development. The project is proposed to consist of 327 units and 528 parking spaces, 80 of which are covered. The C3 zoning district permits multifamily as per the R5 district. The 9.9 acre tract based on the R5 district lot area regulations would actually allow up to 362 units. A single full access driveway is proposed to be located on the Rawling Road perimeter. An exit-only driveway is located on the St. Vincent Way perimeter. A variance is requested to allow advanced grading of the overall site in conjunction with Phase 1 development. A variance is also requested to allow a building height of 50 feet to the top of the building parapet wall. C3 permits a height of 35 feet. The applicant did submit responses to issues from Subdivision Committee describing the building elevations and the mix of 1, 2, and 3, 1 and 2 bedroom units. A centralized trash compactor area with required screening is indicated near the center of the development. Signage will consist of 2 ground-mounted signs. Each building and the associated parking and drives around the building will be a phase. As one building is completed, the applicant will commence construction on the next building and so on through the 4 phases. A common area with pool and other amenities will be located in the Phase 1 area. A 6-foot-tall welded ornamental steel fence will enclose the site. Gates will be located at the entrance to the site and at the exit-only driveway. Building setbacks, parking, and unit density all comply with code standard. Again, there are the 2 variances, one to allow the advanced grading and the building height variance. Staff is supportive of the proposed development. The location is, in staff's opinion, appropriate for the proposed multifamily. Staff recommends approval of the requested subdivision multiple building site plan review, subject to compliance with the comments and conditions outlined in paragraphs D, E, and F, and the staff analysis and the agenda staff report. And staff recommends approval of the requested advanced grading and building height variances.
Okay, the applicant. And you can speak and or defer to the 2 opposition cards that we have, or however you want to do it.
How about if I just keep it short and sweet, but say a little bit?
Those are magic words.
All right. My name is Scott Hurley. The partners on this project are going to be myself, Brandon Huffman, Graham Smith, and James Barnes. All of us live and work in West Little Rock. We've done a lot of business out here, made a lot of improvements. Collectively, we've developed approximately 350 single-family lots, built probably 400 single-family homes, and then most recently constructed the McKenzie Park Apartments on Canis and the Fitzroy Apartments on Chenal Parkway. McKenzie Park is a 168-unit community that today is 97% full, leased. Fitzroy Chenal, we just completed last year. It is 98% leased. These are both Class A facilities that have proven to be great projects for the city of Little Rock, both in quality as well as the tax dollars that they generate. It's our desire to bring another Class A community to the city, which will continue to help with the diversity of housing that is needed in West Little Rock. The average home in West Little Rock has now exceeded $300,000. There's a number of people that would like to live in this area that either can't afford that or, as demographics and lifestyles are changing, have chosen not to purchase a single-family home. This is no longer a desire of just a millennial generation. In fact, one of the partners who's in his mid-50s sold his single-family home and is living in Fitzroy and Chenal right now. The fact that both of our previous communities both leased up in less than 9 months proves that there is ample demand both for what we're building, where we build it, and that our due diligence is correct. This project, Fitzroy Promenade, would be a $45 million project that would create 15 to 20 permanent jobs. but also provide employment for a large number of local companies and subcontractors. Walter, there's also a picture of the front elevation, if you don't mind. This site was not selected at random. The land is zoned C3, which allows multifamily, a project just like this. In fact, I think the minutes state that it actually allows 35 more units than we are proposing. The site was also selected because of its proximity to jobs, retail, restaurants, and other amenities that help ensure the success of multifamily projects. We are adjacent to the Promenade Outdoor Shopping Center, which is over 300,000 square feet. The closest residential neighborhood is over 1,000 feet away. This slide with the buffer, please. So we've got a great distance from there. There's a bunch of open space between us and them. There's trees, there's Brody Creek. I'm sure it's possible to develop it, but with the amount of water, floodplain, floodway that goes through there, it's a pretty good buffer between anything that has a residential zoning. And because of that, we therefore feel it's a good transition between the different zonings out there. Like our other projects, we think this will be a great one as well. With all that we have invested in the city, we wouldn't be doing it if we didn't think so. And I hope you can agree with staff and support the application. And I'll go ahead and save the rest of my time to answer any questions.
Thank you. I'll surely mispronounce that. Karen? Kristen? 8 Whittrey Court?
Yeah, it's me, but I'm not going to talk. I just like opposition. She was going to do all the talking.
Kyla? Kyla, come on down.
Thank you very much. My name is Kyla Acock, as you said. I live at 3 Whittrey Court, and it's near where this complex is proposed to be located. What the applicant skipped over is that there is actually a senior living facility between our neighborhood and this proposed complex. And as some of you may remember, because I noticed some of you from the last time that I was here, you all actually voted against the senior living facility being in that location. And it went in front of the board of directors, and they reversed the decision, and now that is there, this large complex. And at that time, it was discussed among the members, and part of the reason that it was denied is because the location is not a good location to have a large multifamily facility. What eventually allowed them to gain the senior living facility, the other applicant, was that it was senior living. It was not going to have a lot of traffic. They said they had a shuttle to transport residents to and from the location. They had limited parking because elderly people don't drive as much, don't have as many cars. And this complex, I feel, is just a gradual transition into 1,000 neighbors that we already, that we have within the 2 years that we've lived at this location. So we moved in 2015. I have 3 young boys who are the ages of 10, 8, and 3. And when we moved, my youngest was 1. And we had open space behind our backyard, in our backyard. And we searched for 2 years to find an area that was private, that was safe, secure. And we purchased this home in a gated community. We actually did our due diligence in calling the Deltic Timber at the time was the owner of all this property, and it was going to be, behind us, it was going to be basically quiet office space, is what they said, and it was O2. And then this property was C2, as it started out as C2. So our neighborhood has 21 kids in the 9 houses in our neighborhood. They all play outside. It's like everybody knows everybody. It's kind of back to when I was a kid, where you can actually send your kids outside and they can play with their friends and you can trust all your neighbors. And now, all of a sudden, in 2 years, 7 months after we moved to that location is when we get the notice that the property behind us, which abuts almost exactly up to our property, we hear construction noise every day. Beep, beep, beep at 6 a.m. And it's just going to get worse when we have residents there. But this neighborhood that we moved to and that we relied upon in the city zoning, as well as Deltic Timber, who originally owned this property, we relied upon the word of the city and the word of the city zoning, as well as the actual owner of the property. So we feel like this is a slow and just stealthily taking away the privacy and security. It's been just a slow erosion of the zoning code. It started with they built a road connecting where the Champignon Park is, and this is before I moved there, to the Champignon was connected at both ends. So then they start developing behind us, and then they move across the street. And this is so that Deltic Potlatch can sell these properties to somebody and make a profit. So right now, in 2 years, we have easily over 1,000 residents. We also have a hotel. In the interim, I forgot to mention that there's a hotel right by us, that a height ordinance was approved. So now there's a 4-story hotel just right down from the senior living facility. So we have, I don't know how many rooms it has. I couldn't find anything about that. But it's an A-loft, or I'm not really sure how to pronounce it, but hotel. So we have a hotel that has however many guests with a restaurant in it, and then these 2 facilities. So we've added in this small, 10 to 15 acre plot. I don't know how big it is, but 1,000 residents that don't pay property taxes like we do to the city, and a hotel where it's the same thing. They can stay for a night fee. So we feel like this is just a slow takeover. One thing I would like to mention is there has been a progression also or a pattern, I would say, of not giving notice to people when these hearings are going to take place. Basically, back when the Track 75, which was ultimately approved, the residential or the senior living facility, was when it was up at issue, there was never a sign placed on that property that notified people, and we mentioned this here and at the board of directors, that notified residents nearby that this was going to happen. So we, as residents, had to go around and canvass all the neighborhoods nearby and tell them this was happening. Nobody knew. Nobody knew. So we spent hundreds and hundreds of hours on that issue going to tell people about this. Then this issue comes up. We ultimately lost at the board of directors. Then there was never a sign that said anything about it was going to change from C2 to C3 when that happened. So no one knew about this either. So you see, I'm one of the only people here. It's because nobody knows about this. And if you look at C2 and C3, I actually discussed with Mr. Carney on Tuesday the difference between them, it's a bit misleading when you see a C in front of something, you think commercial. I don't think the average layperson would even know if you saw a sign, but maybe you would do some research that the multifamily is a use that doesn't deserve a hearing under C3. I mean, to me, that would be a commercial use if you see a C, but it actually is an as of right use versus a conditional use. I mean, I'm a lawyer. I'm not a lawyer on this, on these type of issues, but I'm actually a trademark lawyer. But I would first look at that and say commercial. And so I think that definitely the average layperson would think the same thing. So I think this has just been a gradual erosion. Trying to slip this by, I kind of feel like, and, saying we're going to change it from C2 to C3, and we're not going to let you know that it's going to be a multifamily. 327 unit apartment building with 586 spaces with 4 buildings. That's not what you expect with a commercial, somebody who's living next to you all the time. I don't think most people on our street who've worked all their lives to try to pay for these houses and pay property taxes to the city have expected to live in an apartment building again with people who are not going to be, making that huge investment. I mean, we made an investment in this home relying on zoning codes and relying upon, commercial office space being in that area. So, we believe the location is not appropriate for a huge multifamily development with many units and buildings because, number one, the location is very near residential neighborhoods, including the Witchery Court and Bascom Place neighborhoods. And the apartment complex is going to increase noise near these homes. There are going to be lots of cars, residents, traffic concerns. Rawling Road in that area where they're suggesting the main driveway to be into the complex, that is a very dangerous area. Are they suggesting, putting a traffic light in there? I think it's needed if that's because, that is already a very dangerous intersection to come out from Champagnat into that area. The other thing is a location very near the Champagnat Pull-in Park, which is on Champagnat Drive. And we brought this up with the senior living facility, and we were told it's seniors. There aren't that many drivers. There was a traffic study done. It showed how many, people are going to be driving this way. I haven't seen a traffic study for this one, but, it's just going to add more people. The senior living facility has, 120 units. This one has 327. That's a huge, huge increase in people. And we had a lot of discussion about this other facility, and I feel like this has just, tried to be stealthily brought by with the C2 to C3 change. And now, when we don't have the opportunity to oppose the change in zoning, now it's going to be multifamily in an apartment complex with all these units. We also believe that our property values will decrease. It already has with the senior living facility. We've had neighbors try to sell their homes and they can't. In fact, when we did the campaign to try to get the senior living facility overturned, we had a sign that said Chenal matters to us in front of Champagnat Circle. They asked us to remove that because they couldn't sell their home. Even the prospect of a large apartment complex being there was daunting for selling homes. Now we had a resident put her house on the market for a year, lowered it way down and couldn't sell it. I talked about there was no sign. We did not receive notice about the changing of zoning from C3 or C2 to C3. Now there's a building height variance as well. You know, they're wanting a taller building. 4-story. I wanted to note that I looked at the staff write-up of the proposed rezoning, which I found in the Planning Commission office, and from the C2 to C3, which I didn't even know, nobody knew that hearing was happening. And it says, it said, the purpose of the rezoning of the land is future commercial development. Commercial, what do you think of when you think of commercial? And states that the city's future land use plan designates this property as commercial. Commercial. And so now the applicant is requesting multifamily residential use of the property, which is not commercial use. And I believe this is an issue. It's not transparent. People don't even know to oppose this. We should be able to depend upon and rely on the Little Rock land use plan and the zoning in place at the time of purchase of our property. And the takeover of Little Rock zoning and land use plans has gradually been approved, which is what's causing this, just more and more and more residents and people added to this small amount of land next to residents. But you can stop this takeover today, and I respectfully request that you vote no to this proposed multifamily, multi-building apartment complex and allow us to be the quiet residential community that we have always been, and not allow developers who have the money and the resources to dictate the use of this property. I also request that you revisit or overturn the decision to change this from a C2 to a C3 due to lack of notice to residents, as well as it not being appropriate for this location to have a multifamily facility. In the alternative, I ask that you continue this hearing to a later date after the applicant has properly notified the citizens by putting signage on the property of the zoning change and the proposed multifamily use so that a fair hearing can take place. Thank you.
Applicant?
Thank you again. I'll try and keep it short.
Thank you again.
We did not rezone the property when we purchased it. It has a C3 zoning in place. It is a great location for multifamily with the proximity to the promenade there. We had our traffic study done. St. Vincent Way is a primary arterial, which staff has approved for the traffic counts of this type of project. As you can see from there, we don't adjoin any residential projects, or any residential tracts. They are commercial, office, open space. That's what we adjoin. We did give our notice as we are required to. I think demand, hopefully, is answered from the statistics of our two previous apartment facilities. Taxes, this is probably going to generate $450,000 of taxes for the city of Little Rock. It is a gated Class A luxury community. It'll be probably a $45 million project. We think it's a great one. We're excited about it. We're about to come up on a waiting list from our other facility, and this would be a great place to take them. And then just real quick, if I could ask our engineer, Tim Daters, to just address something on zoning, just real fast.
I think one of the things that, I'm sorry, my name's Tim Daters. I'm a consultant engineer with White Daters and Associates. One of the things that Scott that didn't address is a project similar to the Fitzroy on Chenal Parkway that they have completed could be constructed on this site with just a building permit review because it would be a single building on a C3 site. And part of the reason that the city allows apartment complexes under the R5 on the C3 uses is because compared with the other C3 uses, it actually generates less traffic. The people reside there. It's not the same as the commercial things like you had up on University and the R Street. the city's deemed this to be a compatible use to commercial areas. Across the street is the Aloft Hotel, which the same partnership group is invested in. And I think part of the attractiveness of this particular site is the proximity of the promenade, the ability to walk to shopping, restaurants, and things of that type. Rawling Road is constructed as a principal arterial street. There's adequate sight distance at the intersections. And the good thing about this location is you can always get out by turning right. You can go wherever you want to go by turning right. In fact, you can come into this project by turning right. And so it's a good fit for the particular area. And again, it's a commercial zone project. There's there's commercial zoning entirely around it. And if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
You done? Commissioners? Questions, comments? Pardon me, questions, comments? I guess a motion would be in order.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I move for the approval of item, what are we on here? 3, with all staff comments and conditions.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
Mr. Chairman, if I may, is the motion including all items, which is the application as well as the variances?
Yes.
Thank you.
My only comment is I drive by there every day. I live in Bascom. I drive by there every day, and it doesn't thrill me. And we just listen to an hour and a half on trees, and it tear all those trees down. But even if it was a shopping center, which I guess it'd be okay with her, it'd still tear all the trees down. So, having said that, any comments, commissioners, questions? If not, if you're in favor of the motion, raise your right hand. And if you're not, 2 noes. How'd you vote, Mr. May? Okay, so it's 1, whatever it is to 1. Good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Item 4.
Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, next item is item number 4, file number Z2771-A, property located at 22 Davin Court. Property contains an existing house and a detached 2-story garage structure, both of which constructed in the mid-1960s. At some point in the past, the detached garage structure was converted into a second dwelling. The current owner acquired the property early this year. The applicant is requesting approval of PDR zoning to recognize the existing use of the property, which is a single-family residence and a detached second dwelling unit. No changes are proposed to the property. The utilities are currently shared. The applicant is proposing to separate the utilities. Both units are rental units. Staff does recommend approval of the requested PDR subject to compliance with the comments and conditions outlined in paragraphs D, E, and F, and the staff analysis in the agenda staff report.
The applicant care to come, would the applicant care to be here? Is he here? Come on up. You can make a presentation, or you wait to see what the one opponent has to say.
I'll just do that. Thank you.
My kind of guy. Ms. Long.
You can just stay up there. It's not going to take me long. Good evening, and thank you for the opportunity to speak with you. I don't have a lot to present to you other than how I'm sorry, my name is Verkeisha Long. I live at 20 Davin Court, right next door to this home. I'm here to speak on behalf of myself, my husband. I have a neighbor here, and we've spoken with several of our other neighbors. Every home on our street is a single-family dwelling. We want to keep it that way. We don't want renters, and I'm not saying that all renters are bad and would tear up property. I'm not saying that, but we do feel like allowing renters to come there would decrease our property value, possibly increase our property taxes, and just invite a turnover that we're not interested in seeing. So, like everyone else who has spoken before me about their areas or their neighborhoods, we just simply want to maintain the character of what we already have, which is an entire street of single-family dwellings. Thank you.
I'm Brian Teeter, and we are, this is going to be a rental property, as previously stated. When we bought the home several months ago, it was in a really bad state of condition. It was really run down, and we have spent a lot of money and time to renovate the house and bring it back up to standard. We've renovated it to a very high level, and that's typically what we do. I'm in the business of buying homes. Typically, they're boarded up homes. They're foreclosures. They've been neglected for a very long time, and I buy those homes. I fix them up to a very high standard, higher standard than is typical in the neighborhood, and then we do rent them out. That's what I do. And then a professional property management company manages the properties. They use background checks. They use credit checks. They scrutinize the application of the tenant because we want to get the very best tenant placed in the property. So it's very, very much a professional level management company, well known here. It has been around for about 30 years, called the Hoffman team here in Little Rock. So they do a very good job with the property, and I understand the concerns about rentals, but I think that this property is going to be very well managed, and we have a track record of that, and we'll have good tenants placed in there. The property, so far as we understood, has been used as a rental property for many years prior, and so this is not exactly a new use for the property. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, we'll be here a while. Excuse me. We've been at this location somewhere between 12 and 13 years. The gentleman who just moved away, who sold the property, was in a bad situation. The house was not empty for any of the time that I have been there. His family bought it some time ago. He moved into it, sometime after they passed away. I'm not aware of anyone having rented it in any recent years. Regardless of that, the home was in disarray. My husband and I were looking into buying the home. Unfortunately, the neighbor, as I said, was in financial straits. He needed money. I don't know how much of a profit they made, but for what my neighbor sold that house for, profit shouldn't even be what they're looking at now. We want someone or some people, a family that we know will be there. You can tell me all day long about your background checks and this and that. You're not the one living there. You're not the one watching people come and go. Bottom line, we want it to stay a single-family dwelling.
Commissioners, questions?
A couple of questions. But for the fact that the intent is to use it as two separate rental properties, would there be any reason to seek a variance if it were a single rental?
Well, the property is owned single-family residential. The only permitted use typically is one single-family residence. At some time in the past, a second residence was created on this property. We don't know when. The county assessor has their records recorded as multifamily, which is their designation that there's more than one dwelling. If this applicant does nothing, if decides not to pursue the planned development, it doesn't change the fact that there's two dwellings on that property. They're recognized as being there. We're not going to make them do away with one of them. We're not going to regulate who lives in the dwellings. That's not an issue for us to be concerned about. So the zoning simply is going to protect this new property owner's investment, the money that he's put into rehabilitating the property. But whether it's approved or denied is not going to change the fact that what's there today will be there tomorrow.
So that's the real question is, there's nothing about what we decide today that's going to change the fact that the owner has the option to rent it or not, or to live in it, or leave it vacant.
That's correct.
Okay. So it seems, what I heard, the biggest complaint was that it was going to be used as a rental, and that is a matter that we can't really have any control over.
No, it's not an issue that we're going to be looking at.
Any other comments, questions?
Yes. Ma'am, when if the renters move in and if they're a problem, report them to the leasing agent. Contact the leasing agent and tell them what's going on, and that'll help you.
I understand that, but if we could avoid having to do that by just getting.
Use the mic, if you got to
Excuse
talk,
me,
use the mic.
yeah, please.
I understand that, and I mean, bottom line, this is purely subjective from myself and the neighbors. That's not to say that anyone who moves there that rents is going to be a problem. But why do we want to set ourselves up for it? The second dwelling that they're speaking of, the family that lived there, his mother used to live up there until, I'm sorry, unfortunately she passed away. But it was still one family. They were all one family. The father, mother, and kids lived down here. Mom lived up there. If there were the same type of situation, that would be fine. But again, that back dwelling overlooks my backyard. My husband has a lot of equipment in that backyard. We are just concerned about what it would do to the character of our street, basically. And personally, we feel like our street is the safest in that area. On the one street, we're surrounded by an apartment complex. On the other side, we're surrounded by an apartment complex, and there is a high level of crime and vandalism in both of those areas. We don't want it on our street.
So if I move my parents, if I bought the property and I moved my parents there and put them in that house A and I lived in house B and I rented them both from him, you don't care?
No, I would not. But that's one family.
So my
living there.
parents
That's
die,
not a
my
number
parents
of-
die, and then he wants to rent the house, so I rent the house to him.
We would probably.
Now you
we
care?
Would yes, I probably
That's
would.
a problem.
We prefer, like we had that family. It was one family. We knew everyone.
Well, I
we
understand.
trusted everyone. If there are multiple families living there, we just find that to be problematic. We would prefer it to stay a single family dwelling.
I got you. Any other questions, Commissioner?
Sorry,
Comments?
I do have one more question. If
Pardon?
the zoning is changed to PDR, what is the most intensive use that permits?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
If the zoning is changed from R2, single family, to PDR, what is the most intensive use that then justifies?
Oh, under the PDR, if that's approved, all that the property can be used for is what's approved under the PDR.
Exactly what is
Exactly what
that
is there
plan.
today, which is, there would be no physical changes. They couldn't take it down and build a new one. It literally is to recognize what you see on the property today and the use of the property as it is now.
Mr. May, Commissioner May?
I appreciate your concern, but you don't want him as a neighbor. I don't see how we can not vote for this, because you could have an individual that might be as problematic as a renter. So you're asking me to look into the future, and I don't see how I can tell him he can't do this. So I'll have to be for this.
Mr. Chairman, if I could, understanding the concerns the neighbors might have, I would simply reiterate what I heard this commission state a minute ago. If there are any issues with this property, I would contact the property management company, which actually is an advantage over what you can do with other properties in the neighborhood. In this case, we know that there's a responsible party that we can reach out to and that you can reach out to that you don't typically have over other residential properties in the neighborhood. You also do have the protection of the zoning by the city. You can reach out to us whatever we can do to help you. I'm assuming there will be no problems, and there'll be good tenants and good neighbors, but you do have a promise of the applicant that there is a property management company that you can reach out to.
Ready for motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move the approval of item 4, including all staff comments and conditions.
There's a second. Second. All in favor, raise your hand. Opposed? There you go. Thank you. Only 3 to go. Item 12. Item 12.
Mr. Chairman, we are now at 8 commissioners. It is the practice of this commission to offer the opportunity to defer once we are at 8, since it takes 6 affirmative votes to approve an item.
Okay, and is the applicant for item 12 here? What's your pleasure? You can defer or you can go ahead.
I'll go ahead if that's okay.
While we're at it, the item 13. Who's item 13?
I'm also item 13.
Okay. Item 17. Well, huh?
Just a moment. Item 17's here.
Well, we'll go ahead, and if y'all want to defer this way, then we're cool. Okay, item 12. He'd like to go ahead.
Item number 12 is file number Z9403, property located at 2322 West 3rd Street. The property is occupied by a circa 1930 bi-level frame residential structure. At some point in the past, the structure was converted into a duplex. The applicant acquired the property over 10 years ago. The building was a duplex when he bought it and has been used as a duplex since. The building has separate electrical and gas utilities for each unit and a shared water meter. The applicant is requesting approval of a PDR zoning for the property to recognize the existing duplex. The applicant states he recently attempted to refinance the property and the lender was unable to underwrite the loan because the building's current zoning is inconsistent with its use. He is requesting approval again of the PDR zoning to recognize the existing duplex with no changes to the property. Staff does recommend approval of the requested PDR subject to compliance with the comments and conditions outlined in paragraphs D, E, and F and the staff analysis in the agenda staff report.
You want to bat first or hear what they say?
Is there someone here that opposes it? Several. Yes, okay. Okay, sure, then I'll go ahead and talk. Yeah, my name is Brian Teeter, as previously stated. I have owned the property for about 10 years. As Mr. Carney said, that the purpose is to get this updated with current use, the way the property's been used for many, many years as a duplex, 2 rental units. Also are getting ready to remodel the property and sell the property. So that's another thing as well. So I want to be able to, when I do sell the property, the next buyer will be able to get the financing for the property as well, because it will need to be updated at that point. Right now, the historical use of the property and the way that I bought it 10 years ago and have used it since, if I go to turn around and sell that property to someone and they go to get conventional financing, that's the same thing will happen to them. If they refinance, then they will, or excuse me, if they try to purchase a property, then it will not be conforming with the appraisal will not be conforming. And so the bank would likely not accept it, or at least traditional financing. So that's, the purpose of doing that is to get that all straightened up so we can go forward with a remodel and then put the house out on the market for sale. Thank you.
Stephen Coke? That's it, right?
Not here, he left earlier.
John Rogers?
Hello, I'm John Rogers. I live at 220 Dunstan Street, which is right across from the house which we're discussing. In reference to the owner, and he's talking about his property and how that they have managed their property, and it's kind of sad to say that I'm hearing that he had the other property. I'm a witness to how this house has been dealt with for the past 10 years. I've lived there for 35 years at my residence, and we have seen, and first of all, let me recognize the people who are in our neighborhood right here, this group. And I have witnessed that this house has been in disrepair for definitely the 10 years that he has had it. And that witnessed a transient lifestyle of people coming through that when we first looked, you would see the people who obviously they were in the place, and you see repeated faces. But over time, this house became a transient house with people come in off the street, come in and stay maybe a week, 2 weeks, and you would see maybe one person that was repeatedly staying there. And then this group would move on, and the house was always staying in disrepair. Steps breaking off, the people going up and down. It was not being safe for the individuals who even live there. So this transient home, and then also the police being repeatedly called. Then 6 to 9 months ago, the people were evicted. They left the house, and I believe that this was on code violations. So there has been an issue with this home for years, and I can understand that I would like to see that this house, and this is from my perspective, and I believe my neighbors, is that this home will go up for sale, and that this house be sold and go back to a single residential house, and for this not to be accepted as, what is this going for right now? A PRD. So one thing I do not understand is, what does mixed use permits mean when it says PRD? I guess from our perspective, does that mean that the house stays as it is, that he's putting it up for sale, and that it would stay as a duplex, or that he can choose to, whoever buys this, choose this mixed use to increase the quantity of people within this property? What does that mean?
Staff?
I apologize, I didn't understand the question.
Okay, the question is, this is what I know. It's going from an R3 to a PRD?
Right.
Okay, so if this is approved, does that mean that whoever purchases the house, or he is the owner of the house currently, that he can increase the people from 2 to 3 people? Or what does mixed use mean for a PRD?
There's no mixed use that's a part of this application. The property is zoned R3, which is a single-family residential designation, allows occupancy of a property by a single family.
Okay.
And the planned development application, the PDR, planned development residential, that he has filed for, is to change the zoning to recognize a duplex, which would be 2 dwellings. And if it's approved, that's all the property can be used for.
Okay, so then he purchased a property that was already 10 years ago a duplex when it has been an R3 single-family dwelling.
That's correct.
Okay. So if he is denied this, then this will have to stay as a single-family dwelling and not be used as a duplex.
No, the zoning will stay single-family, but it will continue to be used as a duplex.
Because it's existing.
Because it's existing and has been apparently for over a decade.
Okay, okay. I guess the biggest concern is that when you're a witness to the level of disarray and how this house has been kept up, and then I listen to him talk about how their properties, they keep them up. We're very concerned about the people who stay there. That doesn't seem to follow with what I'm a witness of. In fact, I've even got one neighbor who she asked some photographs of the house of how it is right now. We've got them with us. We can't put them up on your screen, but we can hand them to you and let you look at these photographs. It just, what he says doesn't match with what he's been doing. And I'm concerned about that and how this is going to be dealt with. So I'm totally against this. And I believe we have one other person who would like to speak. Would you like to talk about this?
Dan, I have a question. If this is approved, if it's sold, does the classification go with the new owner?
Yes, the zoning goes with the land.
Zoning, okay, yes.
Hi, everybody. My name is Chris Bean. I live at 219 Denison. And I guess I have more of a question about if this house is, even though for the last 10 years people have been, it's been a duplex, but it sounds like it's been a duplex illegally. Am I right with that?
It's non-conforming. Is that the same thing?
It's non-conforming. There's a difference between non-conforming and illegal.
Okay, well, explain non-conforming to me.
Well, non-conforming is when you have a zoning use that is being, like this one, that's being used as that, but it's not zoned properly. That does not mean that they're going to go down and take them to jail because they're occupying the property. That's
Right.
not illegal, it's just non-conforming. And typically that happens when something comes in and is being used as that, in that zone, and then is recognized as that. And that's what this does. The plan development would recognize that taking a non-conforming use that's been there and operational and, making it plan development.
Okay, so somebody can buy a place and rent it out illegally or non-conforming and be patted on the back for it when they've been doing it non-conformingly for 10 years? I don't understand that. It doesn't.
Well, I can't explain what you're talking about patting on the back. That's given an intent that we approve of all that, and that is not the intent. When they use a property, there is, we're not out there 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, on everybody's property through the entire city of Little Rock to make sure they're complying with every aspect of the zone. We do have zoning code officers, and we do go throughout the city and, for compliance. And when we see items like that, then, we do bring it up there for enforcement. I wish I could say that happens for every property in the city, but it's a very large city. So it's, so that's what I'm saying. There's a difference between non-conforming and illegal.
I understand.
And again, we don't know how long ago this conversion took place. It's an upstairs, downstairs duplex. The lower part was converted to a dwelling. It was long enough ago that at some point it had been approved by the city for release of separate utilities. It has separate electrical, separate gas utilities, I believe, or water and electrical utilities are separate. So there's certainly been some recognition of the fact that separate electrical and gas utilities and a shared water meter. So this applicant's owned it for 10 years. We don't know when the conversion took place to add the second unit. And again, as with the previous application, if this rezoning request is not successful, it's not going to change the fact that it's a duplex.
Thank you, and I do strongly oppose.
Thank you. Now, I have a card for you, but I could be reading the 12. You don't want to speak on 13, do you? Okay. Thank you. All right, commissioners, questions, comments?
I have a question for the applicant. When did you purchase the property?
Approximately 10 years ago.
And when you purchased it, was a duplex?
Yes, sir. Was a duplex.
So you didn't alter it in any way to make it a duplex?
No, it's been a duplex, and it appears it's been a duplex for much longer than 10 years, just based on, and these folks might know that, living across the street, how long, if it's been operated as a duplex, back maybe 35 years, I'm not sure, but at least 10 years ago, to that point, it's operated as a duplex.
One question. If the property were currently a single-family residence and the owner came to us seeking a variance to a PRD, how would we evaluate that application right now?
I don't know that I can give you a complete answer on that. I'm looking at the zoning pattern in the neighborhood, as you can see on your zoning map. The R4 is duplex zoning. There's duplex zoning in the neighborhood. I don't know how many of those properties are actually occupied by duplexes, but there's certainly duplex zoning. There's R5, which is multifamily zoning to the north and south and east of the site. There's R6, which is a high-density residential up on the northern end.
I'm not sure I understand the question. What was it?
Yeah, so...
Well, the question is really, is it, if someone were to come to us right now and say, I want to convert this single-family home into a duplex, which is apparently what it has been for the past 2 years, how would we evaluate that decision? Is it simply a hard no because of fundamental reason?
No, absolutely not. We would have to look at the circumstances of the property, circumstances of the zoning pattern around the property, the uses that are around the property.
So there are circumstances where if it had never been used in this way, we would approve that use.
There are circumstances where we would
recommend
approval, and some
I
where
understand.
we would.
Whether we vote yes or no, tomorrow it'll still be a duplex.
No, I understand. I have heartburn with the notion, as I think the neighbor has suggested, that someone simply in the dark of night can convert from one use to the next, and so long as a matter of time has passed, we don't have police power, so there's nothing we can do about it. That rubs me the wrong way. However, if an applicant could come to us and get that same relief on the front end, and there is a way we would have approved it, then, you know, I guess I'm less bothered by it.
I understand, and I think the issue with this was the city did do some acts after the fact, but I think the deterrent to that is if you you put up a duplex, it's a non-conforming use, the neighbors complain, and then they go out and they cite you, and then you may have to tear the thing down. I think it's just because the length of time, the neighbors never notified the city that there was a duplex there, and that the city has done some things that have actually, you know, kind of approved of this use.
Yeah.
We're in a bad situation.
Yeah, I don't like this, but at the same time,
understand.
it sounds like if the purpose of this is to get a bank loan to improve the property, maybe that's the best thing for everyone.
I didn't fill out a green card, but may I ask a question?
Tim, use the mic.
Okay, yeah.
And please identify yourself for the cameras.
I'll fill out a green card if I need to. My name is Sarah Stanley. I live at 218 Denison, next to John. I purposely moved to this area because I used to live by UALR, and I would joke with my father that I'd sit outside on my back porch, and it got to the point after 2 years that I heard gunshots every night, and so that was kind of the joke, like, okay, it's time to go in. We heard our first gunshots of the night, so I moved to this area for safety concerns. Honestly, I loved my home by UALR. And I'm with John. I don't understand what he's saying about how he takes care of properties, because he doesn't, at least not by what I've seen here. And I've pulled off these zoning classifications off the Little Rock website, and it says that it's zoned as R3, single-family district, and it says this district, which permits duplexes as a conditional use, is the predominant single-family district north of Asher and east of University. So I guess I'm confused. It says he's already permitted to have it as a duplex, according to this R3 single-family district classification, unless these are old and haven't been updated, or I pulled the wrong ones.
Well, a conditional use is a change in zoning, but it is not a ultimate change in zoning for the property that lasts forever with it ties to the property. It's a conditional use. So in other words, like if a person wanted to have a use put on the property, and it was approved as a conditional use, when that person vacated, then that use goes with,
The person,
you know,
okay.
goes with the
So
land.
possibly the previous owner.
Well, like I said, it's the underlying zoning, so the R3 never leaves.
Okay.
It's a overlay zoning, it's a conditional use, you know, for that property. Okay. And now when the plan development comes in, it changes it is a plan development. It is no longer R3.
Okay.
You know, so it is, you know, they're both tied to the property, but, you know, one of them, the reason we recognize it when it comes in like that is because it ties the exact use with the exact building, you know, for that. So if it cannot change, like we explained with the one previously, that Dana explained it, they cannot add to the building, it is gonna be a duplex.
Okay.
You know, so they cannot go tear the building down and bring another duplex up. It is,
But
you
if
know,
he's
it's
gonna
for that
remodel
one.
it, he can remodel it easily into just a single-family home, if he's already gonna remodel it, correct?
Well, that's the, you know, the homeowner's prerogative to do so, or the landowner's prerogative to do so. This is just being heard before the commission for the, what is before, to do a plan
So
development.
if you deny this rezoning, he would have to remodel it as a single-family home, is that
No.
correct?
No, we do not, now the remodeling is not necessarily,
Or he
it's
would
the
have-
bank that done that for them is because it was not, you know, zoned properly, so they're requiring that for the loan. That is not a city requirement.
Okay. So there's no guarantee that he actually is gonna remodel it. It's just, we're gentleman's agreement at this point, correct? Just based upon his word.
Do me a
he's
favor and
actually-
speak to us, because I have no
I'm
idea
sorry,
what you're saying.
there's no guarantee that he's actually going to remodel it as he states, correct? I mean, it's just based upon, right? So he could continue to rent it as it is now without making any, if he decides, I'm not going to?
There's no requirement under this zoning action that he remodel the structure.
Right. We're going on his word at this point.
That's not a part of this application.
Right. Okay.
You done?
Can I ask him a question? Is that okay? Am I allowed one more question?
Quick.
Do you already have you said you.
Well, now
you-
use the
I
mic.
have to address,
I'm trying, I'm sorry. I was
To
trying to
address the
look at
question to
him.
the commission, and then he can come up and answer that question. Well, we're
I'm trying to respectfully look him in the eye. My apologies.
well, it's because of the mic. It's, you have
I
to be at the mic
understand.
and you're supposed to address the commission.
I guess
You're
my.
you're on TV, remember?
look
Oh,
above your
that's
head, you're
wonderful.
speaking to that camera up there.
Good to know. It's a little late for that. I guess my question is, does he already have somebody interested in this property? I know it really has nothing to do with this zoning, but that is my question.
Thank you, we'll get him up to answer it, and then we'll vote.
No, I do not have anyone currently interested in the property. I've had the property listed for almost the last, at least 4 to 6 months. I've not had any offers on the property. I had the property listed at what I paid for it over 10 years ago, and at that time it was in bad condition, and my intent was to fix it up at that time, but this is one of the reasons
answer's
why.
no.
The answer is no, but
Thank you very much. I'll entertain a motion on this item.
Before we entertain a motion, I'd just like to make a comment. Just looking from a commission standpoint, all along Denison and along the north-south, this would be the only, exception on Denison. And, it looks like the multifamily, is happening more to the east. And I'd be, mindful of what we're about to allow to happen. So I'm opposed to this change.
Okay. Motion, please.
Okay, I move for the approval of item 12, including all staff comments and conditions.
Is there a second? All in favor, hold up your hand.
I don't know.
Those opposed? 3.
It's 5 ayes,
Did
3
you get a
noes.
count? What was it?
Denied. 5 ayes, 3 noes is denial.
5 to 3, so they didn't get to 6.
So it fails.
Yes.
There you go. Item 13. Is that still you?
Item number 13 is file number Z9404, property located at 517 Maple Street. Property is occupied by a circa 1920 one-story frame residential structure. At some point in the past, the structure was converted into a duplex. Current owner acquired the property over 10 years ago as a duplex. The building has separate electric and gas utilities and a shared water meter. The applicant is requesting approval again of a PDR to recognize the existing duplex. No changes are proposed to the building or the property. Staff does recommend approval of the PDR. We did propose to the applicant, and he agreed to make modifications to the one parking space off the front of the property on Maple, which is a gravel parking space. Staff informed him that it ought to be brought into compliance with the city's parking and yards regulations, that it be either paved or defined, contained, and maintained as required by the parking and yards regulation. Again, staff recommends approval, subject to compliance with the comments and conditions outlined in paragraphs D, E, and F, and the staff analysis in the agenda staff report.
Thank you, Dana. Okay, Mr. Reed, we have one card in opposition. Would you like to hear them first, or? Sure. Okay. Charles Clifton.
We have the property right next door to this property, and either intentionally or unintentionally, this has been a slum property all this time. Since, I don't know when he bought it. It's been terrible, in terrible shape. They started remodeling it, putting new siding, didn't fix anything, put a new roof on, still got the big bow in the roof. He hasn't had great tenants there if he's been managing or having a management. It's been terrible. When they started remodeling it, they hooked a water hose up to our water and ran it over to the property to do the work, which kind of bugged us, to say the least. And code enforcement actually took the hose away, because my mom was there and she said, hey, what's going on? And code enforcement actually took that. So I don't have a problem with people, I've got rental property. I don't have a problem with that. I don't really like slumlords because they don't have good people there and they don't take care of the property.
Sir, if you could, the terminology slumlords and.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yep. It hasn't been very well maintained, and we've had terrible looking cars and everything parked next door. Right, as of 3 weeks ago now, maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago, I rented the house that we own, and they complained that at 3:30 in the morning, somebody came by to feed the dog that was left in the property at 3:30 in the morning, and then they left. There's a dog been in there. That's one reason code enforcement was over there. There was a dog left in the property while they're remodeling it. So I would oppose, either that or sell it and get somebody good in there.
Quick question, your property that your neighbors with his property is a rental, or
Yes,
you
it
live
is
in
a
that
rental.
property? Okay.
It is rental. I remodeled that in 2007, and it rents for $1,100 a month. And it would be more if I didn't have this neighbor. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Clifton. Mr. Teeter, do you have anything?
Brian Teeter again. Yes, this property bought over 10 years ago as a fix-up rental, just like the previous property. The economy was bad, and I ended up just having to sit on the property and just rent it out the best that we could. I haven't heard any, personally, in all this time, haven't heard any complaints from any neighbors, this property or the prior one. Nor have I heard anything from the management company either. So, but yes, we have not been able to do the things that I originally wanted to do to the property. So it's still has been in that state of condition. I know one of the tenants has been there, who just recently moved out, had been there for, I think maybe 5 or 6 years, so long-term tenants there. I did just complete the first unit remodel on the building. I did just put a brand-new 3-tab architectural shingle roof on the building. I just painted the building. I just put new landscaping in front of the building. I am in the process of getting ready to pour a new driveway carport pad in the front of the building. I've cleaned up all the landscaping. Interior has all new floors. I've put granite countertops and brand new kitchen cabinets in the kitchen. The rent was $495, and I now have the rent. If you go online right now, pictures.
Sir, please, we don't discuss rental values. That's not relevant.
I'm sorry. I was only to say that I am now advertising the property for significantly more than I have been renting it for in the past due to the improvements in the area where it is. My intent is, as soon as the other side, the other tenant, moves out, I'm going to renovate that side as well, so that I can better the property and get better rents for it as well. While this property has been in poor condition, so was the previous properties. I bought it that way. I want to note that I am a member of the Capitol View Stiff Station Neighborhood Association. I just completed a very large renovation of a commercial building that had been boarded up and closed up for many, many years in Stiff Station, the old Bice Drug Store. I spent a great deal of money and time. I just had a professional mural painted out of my pocket that doesn't enhance the value of the building, just it adds to the value of the neighborhood. So my point is that I am interested. I'm not a slumlord by choice. If that is the way the property was originally bought with the intent to fix it up and economy factors did not allow until now, that's just where I am, and when this has happened for me to be able to get to do this. So I do consider myself as someone who takes pride in the neighborhood and tries to give back whenever I can, and it's just a slow process. Like I said, this property is one that I've been stuck with for a while without being able to do anything. My intent now is to clean up, and all the exterior work has been done. All of the interior work on the one unit has been completed, and the building will be complete when I am able to tackle the second unit. At that time, I'm either going to reevaluate, keep the property, or I'm going to turn around and sell it. But anyway, that's a little bit of backstory on it, and I appreciate it.
Commissioners? Comments? Yes, sir.
Are they just going to have one parking place? Because that's a big issue. One parking place for a duplex. You stated that it's been a gravel parking place there. That's what it is. And there's only one.
Right, there's one on the front. There's one parking space in the front. There is parking in the back off of the alley. There is parking back there. And we would
It's
expect
gravel
there to
also.
be,
It's just gravel.
That's all it has to be. Now, the one in the front we want to see improved. There's no code regulation to prohibit gravel parking in the backyard.
Okay.
Commissioners?
Just one question. It says current zoning's R3, and then it says allowed uses single-family, non-conforming duplex. So I'm confused as to whether a duplex is actually permitted in the current zoning or prohibited.
Could you repeat the question, please?
Well, on the actual page, it says current zoning is R3, and then it says allowed uses is single family, non-conforming duplex. Does that mean that duplex is permitted under R3?
Yeah, well, no. In this case, on this property, what is permitted is single family or this non-conforming duplex. It's there. It's going to stay there, whether the zoning is approved or not.
How does this differ from the one we just did?
No different than the one you just did.
Except that there's more PDRs in the neighborhood.
But the fact remains, it was two non-conforming uses.
It'll
be a duplex tomorrow, just like it is today. And the only difference is he has a problem trying to sell it. So is that right? He can't get title, or the bank won't loan it because it's not an official use. Is that correct?
Right. The use of the property does not conform to the zoning. Okay. But again, who knows when that was done? He bought it 10 years ago as a duplex. The utilities were split some time ago, which requires city approval to put in separate utilities. So again, who knows when that was done. It is a duplex today. It will be a duplex tomorrow.
Thank you. Commissioner?
I have a quick request of the applicant. I noticed kind of in my mind, I couldn't recall hearing this issue, and I noticed that you weren't at the subdivision meetings. So my recommendation would be to please attend those in the future if you have other issues, and it would prevent some of this back and forth questioning that we have. And obviously, that is part of the process for us to get educated on the material so that we don't, just have to rely solely on staff for questions about the concerns. So just a recommendation after looking through, the past 3 items that we've discussed is that, if you could make those, that'd be very beneficial for commissioners in the future. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other comments, discussion? Ready for the motion?
Okay, I move for the approval of item 14, including all staff recommendations and comments.
13, wasn't it?
13, sorry.
If you're in favor of it, hold up your right hand, please. If you're opposed, passes. You got 2 out of 3. All right, last but not least, you want to defer or stay? Oh, no, we're going to stay. Huh? Been here this long, come on.
Thank you.
Item 17, Mr. Carney.
Item 17, Shackelford Forest Communities Long Form POD, file number Z9408, property located in the 5600 block of South Shackelford Road. The applicant is requesting POD zoning for this undeveloped 27.9 acre tract. The property is proposed to be divided into 4 lots with a 1,500-foot commercial collector street. Shackelford Road will be improved to arterial standards abutting the site. The 4 lots will be developed in phases with uses as follow: a day treatment building on lot 1 with an 88-space parking lot, a research building on lot 2 with a 40-space parking lot, a professional office building on lot 3 with a 22-space parking lot, and then 16 cottages on the 4th lot. The applicant has responded to the technical issues that were raised by staff as we did our review of the item. We did receive and approve a sketch grading and drainage plan and site distance certification. The cul-de-sac has been modified to provide a required 96-foot diameter. When the application was first filed, the applicant was proposing a public street. Staff had concerns with that. The application was amended so that the street is a private street. It will be gated with controlled access to the development. An access easement is to be provided for the property adjacent to the south. And again, the private street will be designed to comply with code standards. Staff does recommend approval of this application subject to compliance with the comments and conditions outlined in paragraphs D, E, and F and the staff analysis in the agenda staff report. And staff recommends approval of the variance to allow use of trails in lieu of sidewalks.
Mr. Daters, you have 1 card. Do you want to defer and wait, or?
I think we'll defer and wait. Thank you.
Sherry Enoch?
Good evening. My name is Sherry Enoch. I am a homeowner in the Pecan Lake neighborhood. I'm also an officer with the Pecan Lake Property Owners Association. Pecan Lake is just a few blocks down Highway 5 from this proposed facility. In addition to my neighborhood, you also have Tall Timber West, You have Greenwood Acres, Stagecoach Crossing. There's also in the makings another residential neighborhood behind Stagecoach Crossing. So you have single-family neighborhoods all around this proposed facility. We have a concern as to the particular use of this facility. Because we're homeowners, we have kids in the neighborhoods, there's a school close by. When I called, when we got notice of this meeting and I called, what I was advised was that it was going to be a big facility, extend over 4 lots, which the gentleman just mentioned, a medical facility, inpatient, outpatient care, and substance abuse. That there would be cottages for a recovery program that they're offering. Our concerns are the particular clientele that the establishment will house, more so in the cottages. And don't get me wrong, we don't begrudge anybody, any business owner, viable business, and anyone trying to get their life right. But we do have a concern about the clientele that will be there. More so, we're concerned about if any of the patients will be violent offenders, sex offenders, that type of thing, because there are children in the various neighborhoods, and there's also a nearby school. How many patients or clients will there be at the facility at one time? Will it be adequately staffed at all times? What type of security measures will there be in place regarding the facility? You made reference to some type of change being made to Shackelford. Now, if I'm not mistaken, this facility is going to be right there at the intersection of Shackelford and Highway 5, which there's no light there. Traffic a little farther north.
Right by the wastewater plant, way north.
Oh, you're way up there. Okay, my mistake. But still, we have a concern about the clientele because you're still in close proximity to all of these single-family neighborhoods. And we didn't get any particulars as to the particular clientele, how many they're going to house, that type of thing. So that's our concern with how this facility will interface with the various neighborhoods around it. So if we could just have him to address that. Let me make sure we don't have any other questions. Okay, we talked about that. But yeah, basically security concerns and the particular type of clientele. Thank you.
Thank you.
Walter, do you have a vicinity map that's large enough to show where the residential subdivisions are? I didn't think so. Tall Timber and Pecan Lake are about a half a mile away, or closer to a mile. Stagecoach Crossings might be a half a mile away, located further south on Shackelford Road. This development is not adjacent to residential developments. It's a rather unique piece of property in that it's about 500 feet wide and a half a mile deep. It's a good plan for that particular facility. When we complete this project, I think about 70% of the project will be in green space. We're going to have a buffer along the front that's about 150 or 100 to 200 feet in depth along South Shackelford Road. We are going to improve South Shackelford to a minor arterial status or pavement as we're required by the city. And we have agreed with the property owner to the south to provide them access through our entrance to their property. In terms of the particular use of the development, Carol, do you want to address any aspect of that in terms of, if you would, please?
Mr. Daters, also, we don't discuss what type of patients and what their treatments are.
I think that Carol Todd and Carol Witham are here also, and I think Carol can help a little bit in terms of the general.
We want to be very cognizant of the Fair Housing Act and the
general
federal
type of the
laws.
facility.
So, I'm Carol Witham. I'm actually the CEO of Inspiration Day Treatment. It's a day treatment that serves those with a chronic mental illness. I've spent 30 years of my career advocating and a philanthropist working with individuals with a chronic mental health condition. So I would love to educate the property owners. I can understand your fears. And I promise you, by the end of our conversation, I can absolutely address any concerns you may have.
And you're extremely experienced in this type of facility.
If you're going to have that conversation, we prefer you do that in private
But we are dealing with an experienced client, and we think it's a great project.
Use the mic, please.
Our client has got experience in operating this type of facility. It's a great location. There'll be tons of green space, great trail system, and we ask for your support. And we'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you. Commissioners, you got any questions? Comments? Entertain a motion, please.
Could I say one other thing? It'll be real quick because I know we all want to go home. And I appreciate the comments. I think what would have been really helpful if they would have reached out to the surrounding neighborhoods, whether that's mandatory for them to do or not. It still would have been helpful to probably have calmed some fears or some concerns. That would be the only thing that I would interject to them, that going forward, that would probably be a good thing to do, because you've got POAs all around you. So that would have been a nice thing to do. Would have saved us some time.
For what it's worth, if I could wave a magic wand, and perhaps we will do that someday soon, is to figure out a better way to get, because on almost everything that comes up, it's, I didn't know, nobody told me, and I agree with you. It happened to me on a project just a while ago. Having said that, entertain a motion, please.
Yes, I move for approval of item 17, including all staff comments and conditions.
Got a motion, is there a second? Second. Any other discussion? All in favor, raise your hand. Those opposed? Thank you for coming. Staff, you got anything else?
Citizens communication.
We are adjourned.